Schiller is director of Brown University's Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy.
All the indicators are pretty good, and the recession that was supposed to be here now isn't here, and yet all of the attention is on global affairs. The Democrats are every day losing the opportunity to remind voters that this is the economy that Biden has brought them.
Brown University political scientist Wendy Schiller calls the Democratic messaging on the economy a stunning failure. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is defending his country's raid on the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City, saying that Israeli troops uncovered a Hamas command center underneath that facility.
We had concrete evidence that there were terrorist chieftains and terrorists, their terrorist minions, in the hospital. Hamas was using the patients in that hospital as a human shield.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on CBS Evening News. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
news, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
$10:40 on Wall Street. I'm Nathan Hager. The November stock rally is taking a bit of a breather on this Friday morning. Bonds have been rallying this month as well on signs of a slowing economy and rising bets that the Fed will be able to cut rates next year. But Franklin Templeton fixed income CIO Chanel Desai says there is still a risk inflation picks back up, and she sees the drop in bond yields reversing.
It's been too fast. I don't think it's underpinned by fundamentals, and I do think we're probably going to get a reversal. So I think that closer to 5 is a lot closer to where the bond market needs to be. Does it happen in the next week, 2 weeks, or even this year as we rally into year end? Maybe not.
And you can hear more from Chanel Desai of Federated Hermes on the Bloomberg Surveillance podcast. We'll start with bonds. The 10-year's down 5/30 seconds right now, so the yield's up to 4.45%. The 2-year yield close to 4.89%. Modest declines for stocks. The S&P is down 4 points. The Dow's down 36. The NASDAQ is lower by 23 points. We have 5 of the 11 main sectors in the S&P 500 in the green right now, led by energy. NYMEX crude right now is up 2.8% at $74.94 a barrel, so close to 75 once again. COMEX gold is down 0.1% at $19.85 even per ounce. The euro 1.0885 against the dollar. The yen is at 149.63. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller.
All right, Nathan Hager, thank you so much. We appreciate that, of course. Matt Miller, Paul Sweeney live here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We're doing the streaming thing on YouTube, so check that out, youtube.com, and go to Bloomberg Radio. All right, for some crazy reason, Matt Miller's under the impression that he's going to get one of these weight loss shots or pills or whatever because he thinks he needs to lose weight, which he does not, particularly now that he's shaved his beard off.
First of all, I now know more than ever that I need to lose weight since I shaved my beard off. You know, I was hiding something with that. And secondly, I'm really more interested in fighting off potential diabetes later in life and fighting off potential cardiovascular risks later in life.
You do that with, I think, diet and lifestyle stuff instead of taking...
Yes, but I, as you know, am incredibly weak. You know, in many senses, but definitely when it comes to food.
All right, I'm going to turn to somebody who knows what's going on in this space, and that's Madison Moeller. She, Bloomberg's healthcare reporter here. You've got a story out here. Weight loss pills are the next big thing in a $100 billion market. So can you just lay out for us? I'm not really paying attention to all this weight loss shots and pills and all this. Can you just lay out what's going on out there these days? Because these things have been around for a while, right?
Yeah, well, so Ozempic has been around for a while, and that's probably the one that everyone's most familiar with. It's a diabetes drug commonly used off-label for weight loss, but we also have Wegovy, we have Zepbound, and those are actual obesity drugs. All of them are injections. And the drug makers, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, are making billions of dollars off of these drugs. So
Ozempic and Wegovy are Novo Nordisk's.
Yes.
Eli Lilly is called what?
Zepbound for weight loss.
Zepbound. Bad name. Not that the others are great, but Ozempic is so much easier and pleasurable to say.
It's catchy. It's catchy. Yeah.
But as Paul has been saying for a long time, you got to have a pill because nobody wants to be injecting themselves. I don't care if you tell me the needle's small. It doesn't hurt. I've been hearing that for 50 years. It's just weird, you know, injecting yourself with something. It makes me feel like I may have taken a wrong turn somewhere. So if I can just take a pill, I'm going to be able to do that with a clear conscience. Can I get that today?
I mean, you can for diabetes. So there is Ozempic in a pill is already available. It's called Rybelsus, and it's made by Novo Nordisk. But the other drug makers that are trying to get in on this market are now, you know, they see pills as the next thing. I mean, it's similar to what you said. They're like, not every patient wants to take an injection. We think that we can reach more patients by having a pill. It's a little bit more inconvenient. It's actually cheaper to manufacture as well. Yeah. A little bit easier to manufacture. And so that's sort of the bet that now Pfizer's making, AstraZeneca's making. They're trying to get in on this market that they are not yet in, and they see the opportunity in pills.
So, I mean, think about the problem with injections is not only giving yourself a shot, but there's like so many syringes now around in the trash, right?
I guess. I don't know.
That's not good.
No, that can't be good. I mean,
I guess they could be biodegradable to an extent, not the needle, obviously.
In Europe, you can recycle the pens. There's like a recyclable program, but we don't have that.
Pen
here
is
in
such
the
a
US.
nice way to say it.
Yeah.
well,
That's the term the flack tells you. No, not syringe. It's a pen.
What's a flack?
A flack is like a PR person who's trying to spin the story.
I got you.
you know?
Okay. All right. So, I mean, if somebody like a Matt Miller walks into his or her doctor and says, "I want to lose 10 or 20 pounds. Can you prescribe this for me?" If I'm a doctor, I'm going to say no. I mean, this is for people with severe overweight, comorbidity issues, whether it's obesity and diabetes and things like that.
No, not Ozempic and Ribelsis, right? That's for people who are pre-diabetes. So if I get
Just
a
diabetes.
blood test,
Yeah.
oh, I thought it was pre-diabetes.
I mean, there are some doctors that will prescribe it for prediabetes because they see the benefit in, we can ward this off. But it's not all doctors, and it sort of depends on your insurance situation too,
That's
because
the other
they're
part,
very
yeah.
expensive.
Does Novo Nordisk release a list of the doctors that will prescribe?
In Greater Westchester County.
You might find it on Reddit.
Exactly. Oh, there you go. That's
Good point. And they do have subreddits for Ozempic
Yeah, they
and Wegovy, like with 50,000 members.
All right. Who's paying for this stuff now?
Well, so that's the thing is the insurance coverage is sort of spotty. I mean, we have some private insurers paying for it. Some employers see the value in this for covering these weight loss drugs for their employees. But it's not really like that across the board. And we are seeing a lot of people just pay cash and pay in full for these because they want these drugs.
Which is why there have been production shortages. How are the shortages looking right now? I mean, have they ramped up production? I talked a couple of weeks ago to the CEO of Novo Nordisk, and he was like, "We have a plan. We're not going to tell you what it is for competitive reasons, but..."
Yeah, both of the companies have invested billions of dollars into ramping up manufacturing capacity. Eli Lilly actually announced this morning that they're building a new, I think it was like $2 billion plant in Germany that's going to help with their injectable production. So the weight loss shots and also the diabetes shots. And the thing is, we just don't know if that's going to be enough yet. Like, the demand for these is so high, it's sort of unprecedented. So we don't know that all of these investments are actually going to help in the near term, but over time, probably will.
And how hard does this hit the stock of, say, like a Unilever?
You're not going to buy cookies?
Don't they own Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's?
I guess.
I mean, like that, the market is reacting to these drugs in lots of, unusual ways. It's like every time there's a study that comes out or a new approval, you sort of see the ripple effects in the food industry, in retail, in other medical devices, things like that.
Crazy.
It's just, there's a lot of predictions about what could happen and not a lot of data yet about what's actually happening.
Is this affordable to people? Like, I guess it's all about the insurance, I guess. But, I mean, is there an expectation? I mean, this could have such amazing positive impacts on so many people around the world.
Right.
It's almost like you feel like it's kind of like you got to make it available to everybody at a reasonable price. Is there any of that movement? Or is this the drug company saying, no, we're going to maximize our profit here?
Well, so right now, I mean, the list price is not affordable. And AstraZeneca's CEO said, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, he was here in Bloomberg headquarters, and he was saying that his vision is to make a pill that's cheaper and more affordable, especially to people in low and middle income countries, because right now these drugs are not available there, and they're certainly not affordable. So over time,
but they don't have the obesity problems that we do. I mean, America
this is
rules the
prime
roost when it comes to being fat.
Exactly.
But by the way, I was wrong. Haagen-Dazs is not owned by Unilever. Okay. It was a Nestle. Nestle had obtained the rights to sell it, and they sold it to a private equity consortium in 2019. But Unilever does own Ben & Jerry's. Yes. They own Magnum, which is very popular in Europe, and they own Cornetto.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up.
As they say in the UK.
Very good. Madison Muller, thank you so much for joining us. Madison Muller, she is a Bloomberg healthcare reporter, bringing us up to date on, this one is incredibly fast-growing part of the healthcare space.
It's like AI Junior for the whole market.
AI Junior, you're exactly right. It's AI Junior for this market. It's all a lot of people can talk about. S&P 500 pretty much unched here on the day. NASDAQ off about 0.2%. Yields a little bit higher, 10-year, 4.45%. A little more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Let's get some company news right now with Lisa Mateo.
Thanks, Paul. It's damage control for Tesla after investors reacted to Elon Musk's endorsement of an anti-Semitic post on X, his social media website formerly known as Twitter. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow has a reaction.
On Tesla, we saw people like Ross Gerber, who's familiar to our audience on Bloomberg Television, come out and say that he's an asset manager. His clients have come to him and said, you know, they don't agree with this. It impacts their desire to hold Tesla shares and own the vehicles. Bloomberg has reported other investors who have basically responded saying that Musk's action or post has caused them to think again on their reaction.
Now, Tesla shares right now are down just a fraction. Meanwhile, IBM has pulled its advertising off the X platform. A report found that ads for the company showed up close to pro-Nazi posts on the social media site. IBM issued a statement saying that it has zero tolerance for hate speech and discrimination. Now, this morning, an executive from X emailed Ed Ludlow to respond with this.
X has done a sweep of those accounts that Media Matters had found associated with the offensive content. Those accounts will no longer be monetizable. In other words, ads won't show up against those accounts that they did a sweep of. But this is the bit that X is pushing back on. They're telling me that X is not intentionally placing a brand next to this type of content. It is completely based on the user who is trying to view the content.
So basically, in this case, the user is the Media Matters researchers who are seeking out those posts for their analysis. It's confusing, but there you go. Those are the company stories we're following this hour. I'm Lisa Mateo, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Matt Miller and Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio looking at these markets right now. Absolutely nothing happening in terms of the big indexes. The S&P is unchanged, as is the Dow. The NASDAQ's off about 1/10%. So not a lot of movement here. Pretty quiet on the index level. Yields pushing a little bit higher here. The 10-year Treasury is up a couple of basis points. 4.45%, so well off of that 5% rate we had just a few weeks ago. WTI crude oil, that's up almost 3%. A little bit of a rebound here, sitting right about $75 a barrel for WTI crude oil. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. We'll get world and national news with Amy Mars.
All right, thank you, Paul. President Biden has signed a stopgap spending bill averting a government shutdown for now, putting off some spending fights until mid-January and early February. Wendy Schiller chairs the Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy at Brown University.
It looks now that the Republican leadership do not want to shut the government down, that they see a political cost. I mean, this has happened now twice, and they have not shut the government down. They clearly see this as a negative for them and their party going to 24. That's
Brown University's Wendy Schiller, but there are more spending fights to come. House conservatives are demanding deep budgets, and this stopgap does not include aid to Israel or Ukraine. A Washington Post Monmouth University poll finds former President Donald Trump holds a 26-point lead in New Hampshire to win the GOP nomination for president. That poll also shows former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley rising to a distant second place. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who had been leading Trump at the beginning of the year, has lost ground in New Hampshire and is now in fifth place. RSV infections are rising sharply in parts of the U.S., including in Georgia, Texas, and Virginia. The federal government is responding with the release of 77,000 more doses of a new RSV shot for newborns. Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU is among the emergency department, seeing a surge with more than 12.5 children currently hospitalized. Pediatrician Tiffany Kimbrough.
We've been seeing that kind of increase week over week since the beginning of October, and then starting to see those kids, coming into the office sick, some of them ending up in the emergency room, unfortunately, and some ending up admitted to the hospital, including our ICU.
Nationally, cases are about as high as they were last November, and predictions are that this season won't be as bad as last year. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg. Matt and Paul.
All right, Amy Mars, thank you so much. We appreciate that. All right, so go into this whole EV thing. You got to charge them, right? That's kind of a big issue. And so one of the companies out there is ChargePoint Holdings. Shares collapsed after the company announced the sudden resignation of its longtime chief executive officer while posting disappointing quarterly revenue. The stock, which already lost more than two-thirds of its value this year, plunged as much as 38%, its biggest intraday decline ever Friday here in New York. The electric vehicle charging company's market capitalization fell to about $750 million from peak of $11.2 billion in 2021. I mean, isn't this an easy play? Don't they have to build like a ton of these? I don't see what the problem is.
It seems to me that it should be, although, Barry Ritholtz was saying yesterday, real estate isn't cheap everywhere, and I mean, there's some places where I guess in North Dakota you could put up thousands of these, and they probably only have like 2 charging stations in North Dakota. In New York, it's much more difficult. And I've asked the CEOs of BP and Royal Dutch Shell why they don't just put a charger at every one. Now, number one, they're franchise businesses, right? So yep. BP doesn't own all the BPs. But number two, it's just not really in their interest to put a competing product up.
Yeah,
right?
It isn't.
They make money with gas.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think there's probably pushback. They would never tell us that because they want to save their ES. They're like, no, we care so much about the environment. But obviously they care more about profits, which is good if you're a shareholder.
Well, here's something. EV charging companies have struggled to compete with Tesla, which has built out a vast network of plugs with a different connector design than the rest of the U.S. industry. That's
huge.
A problem.
Everybody wants it. So Ford and GM and others have made deals with Tesla to get that same kind of technology.
The superior charging experience the EV manufacturer offers its customers has led almost all major automakers to switch to its connector as the North American standard. So there you go. So what I thought was a pretty straightforward deal has proven to be kind of difficult for some of these EV companies. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller.
Why were the economists so wrong? What are the economists getting wrong?
Isn't this a slam dunk time to buy U.S. Treasuries?
Soft landing, hard landing, no landing. I don't know.
True. What the heck does that mean?
I don't know.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
We're going to be in an environment with higher rates for longer.
The 5-day in-office work week is effectively dead.
It's definitely a good sign that we're not ready to land this economy just yet.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, coming up in this hour, we're going to get the latest on what's happening out there in these markets. It is Friday, which means we talk municipal bonds. Boom. Joe Misek. He is our go-to person on all things munis. He's going to join us in studio.
The muni chat usually ends up really being about kind of sports or malls,
yes,
right? It's stadiums or malls.
Kind of where we go. Yeah. And we're going to have a little bit of that today. And then, of course, it is Friday, and it is time for What is Matt Miller Driving? We're going to have Kevin Tynan. He's a senior autos analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. He's going to join us here to talk about some of this stuff.
I will tell you that I'm driving a fairly affordable SUV that is also really green and has some quite cool technology.
Really? Okay.
And it's a brand that is ascendant.
Ascendant. All right. You're teasing us there. I like that. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Right now, let's kick things off. Nathan Hager, he's down in D.C. He's got Bloomberg Business Flash.
Well, I think I heard you say a few minutes ago, Paul, not a whole heck of a lot's going on the index level for stocks. You kind of called it. The indexes are taking a break from this $2.7 trillion November rally, fueled by bets that the Fed is done when it comes to raising interest rates and could maybe start cutting in the middle of next year. David Lefkowitz, head of U.S. equities at UBS Global Wealth Management, says his base case is soft landing, rising stocks and bond yields, and a focus on quality.
We're in a late cycle environment, right? We have a low unemployment rate, we have an inverted yield curve, and inflation is coming down, but it's still higher than the Fed's target. That's a late cycle environment. For stocks, in our work, that suggests you want to own quality companies. These are companies that have high returns on capital, they have strong balance sheets, they generate consistent and generally less volatile earnings growth.
And you can hear more from David Lefkowitz of UBS on the Bloomberg Surveillance podcast. For now, stocks aren't doing a whole lot. We check the markets all day long here on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 3 points. 4505 is the S&P level. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 38 points, 34,907. The NASDAQ is lower by 25 points, trading at 14,088. The 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 4.46%. 6 of the 11 main industry groups in the S&P are in the green right now, despite the overall lower trend. A little change to lower, but the biggest gainer right now is energy, up 1.6%. And NYMEX crude is higher now by 2.8%, trading close to 75. Actually, just went above 75, $75.02 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate. COMEX gold is down 1/10%, 1985.20 per ounce. The euro 1.0885 against the dollar. British pound 1.2433. The yen at 149.59. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues with Paul Sweeney.
Connection lost.
Nathan Hager, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Matt Miller, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. So head over to youtube.com and search Bloomberg Radio, and that's kind of where you'll find us. Let's see what's happening under the hood. Nathan just gave you kind of the headline, what the indexes are doing or not doing. Let's see what's happening at the company level. We do that with Nora Melinda. She covers all the equity markets for Bloomberg News, and she joins us live here in studio. Nora, what are you looking at?
So kicking off with Tesla, the stock is actually now in the green ever so slightly, but earlier it had fallen about 5% in 2 days as investors were criticizing Musk's endorsement of an anti-Semitic post on X, formerly known as Twitter, yesterday. There's just really been mounting concerns from advertisers about his repeated endorsement of anti-Semitic language, and the European Commission joined IBM in announcing that it will stop advertising on the platform. So we do have investors, a little bit nervous about, the language that he continues to use, but the stock is bouncing back as of now as we speak.
I mean, Linda Yaccarino, she's a real pro in the advertising business. She goes over to X or whatever it is to sell advertising. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, just career suicide. But
and I think people are really just interested to see what she will do about this. You know, will she have what can she do? I mean, she did say, quote, X has been extremely clear about our efforts to combat anti-Semitism and discrimination. There's no place for it anywhere in the world. It's ugly and wrong, full stop.
So I got to say that I saw this story this morning as well, and it didn't have a link to the Post. They just said,
I noticed that as well.
They just said Musk, agreed with an anti-Semitic post or promoted it, and I was like, you can't tell me that without showing me what the Post says.
Well, I can tell you what the Post said. It actually said, so one of the users said, quote, that Jewish people hold a dialectical hatred of white people. And then Musk followed up by responding saying, you have said the actual truth. So it wasn't a post that he made, but a response endorsing a post that was made by a user.
All right, next. I've had enough of that guy.
I have too.
Yeah.
Moving on to Applied Materials. We spoke about this earlier, but that stock is sinking as much as 8.3% for its worst drop since December of 2022. We do know that this company is the largest U.S. maker of chip-making machinery. Its losses are not as deep as they were earlier in the session, but the stock is still down more than 5% after a report that it faces a U.S. criminal investigation for allegedly violating export restrictions to China.
Santa Clara, California. Boy, if my son doesn't get a job in tech in Silicon Valley, going to college out there, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so Santa Clara, that's
Is that the banana slugs?
No, that's Santa Cruz.
Oh, sorry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
They all have these weird mascots out. I mean, Nora's mascot is kind of weird too, right? The Wahoos.
I can't even.
Cavalier. It's a Cavalier.
Wahoo wah, but
Yeah.
But
it
what's
is hard to explain.
Santa Barbara was in here earlier.
Yeah, I don't know what they are.
They're the Gauchos,
Oh yeah, that's good.
right? And
But
Santa.
the banana slugs are the best.
Yeah.
Yes. Although my University of Richmond Spiders can they can.
That's
hang.
also pretty cool.
That's also a
Right.
good one.
Got some game in the fight, but. Moving on to weight loss, right? Everyone's been talking about the weight loss drug, and Eli Lilly is actually up a little bit, about 0.7% after announcing that it will build a $2.5 billion manufacturing site in Germany to help expand its production capacity for some weight loss drugs. The demand for the weight loss drug has really just skyrocketed in the past few months, and the company is hoping that this new plant will help diversify its growing presence in Europe.
Interesting. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, talk to us about obesity in Germany, Matt.
It's just not as prevalent. I mean, obviously, there are big people in Germany.
Big Germans.
And, a lot of beer, a lot of sausage. But it's not the same as America.
What we experience here.
Yes. When you spend time abroad and then you land back in the U.S., you're like, oh, wow. We need some drugs for this.
Part of it's just some of these portions you get in restaurants is out of control
Right.
for some of these things.
And we have to take it home. We have to box it up.
It's true.
We can't eat it all in one sitting.
Exactly.
But I do have one last stock for you.
Although, by the way, Cracker Barrel, you being your country boy breakfast, I will finish that.
I love Cracker Barrel.
You do?
I do. I love it. I love
Country boy
it.
breakfast, just unbutton your, loosen your belt and sit right down.
Sit back.
Yeah. I don't
keep
know.
it coming.
I guess I'll try one. I'll try one out. I haven't been to a Cracker Barrel in 20 years. I used to stop there.
It hasn't changed.
Trips across the country because back then we had cassette players in cars, Nora. And
I can't even fathom.
We would get books on tape at one Cracker Barrel and you could return it at another. And I thought that was the coolest technology ever.
Innovative.
Like I could pick up a books on tape in Pittsburgh and then return it in like Hershey,
Well, what I like about Cracker Barrel is, I forget what the pitch was. I remember seeing on the IPO, like 85% of the restaurants are within a mile from an interstate.
I believe it because you always see it on the
model.
sign as you're driving through.
That's their model, and man, it works, baby.
It works. Works on me at least.
We found one out in Jersey, so
I'm jealous.
Every 6 months or so we'll hit that.
As you should.
Boy breakfast. All right.
As you should.
All right, Nora Melinda, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate that. As always, Nora, she covers all the equity markets for Bloomberg News. We appreciate getting a few minutes of her time. All right, it's Friday, Matt. And before you go on paternity leave for some ungodly amount of time.
True. I'm about to have a baby. Wow. It's about to drop.
As the kids say. So before, we had to get one final Munis in Focus segment for you. I'm not even sure, is it sponsored? It's not sponsored today.
Even if it's not sponsored by
we do
Build
it anyway.
America Mutual, we should still say, bam!
Exactly. So anyway, Joe Mysick joins us. He covers all the municipal bonds for Bloomberg News. He's the go-to person on the muni space. Joe, what are you looking at? What are some of the big stories happening in the muni bond space? Because we've had Treasury yields. I mean, we had the 10-year at 5%. We're now down 4.45%. I guess people are buying bonds. Are they buying munis?
Oh, man. I go on vacation. I come back, things were going to pot, so to speak, and come back, and things are roaring. Business is a booming.
Nice.
We have issuance up, but issuance has been climbing up the last 6 months, despite what we were seeing in rates. As you say, rates have collapsed. What we haven't seen yet is outflows stop. We still have.
Where are the flows going? If they're coming out of munis, are they going into just 2-year treasuries and things like that?
Nah, sometimes into ETFs, and they're going into separately managed accounts, things like that. But it's declined to about 200 million a week. So that's, I guess, good news.
Just to put it in perspective, Joe, I can't remember if it was Kazatsky or somebody else on your team who told us it's not unreasonable to expect essentially 9% returns on munis if you count the tax advantage that you get. Is that a fair assessment of what you can get these days?
Well, it was, yes.
It was like 2-3 weeks ago.
I think this week, we've seen a drop in yields. Certainly in the tens of basis points, which in the old days, munis were hardly ever changed in yields, but there was the great unchanged market. But
there was no volatility.
Now, 10, 20, 30 basis points, nobody really seems to bat an eye.
But the same is true about treasuries, right? I mean, you didn't see 20-point swings in treasuries in the past,
but a little more common than munis. Munis were always, first of all, always lagging. But wow, yields, like you say, they have collapsed, or they're on their way to collapsing.
By the way, how long have you been covering this market? Because I know you famously helped Tom Wolfe write the Bond Trader part of
Bonfires of
the Vanity. I was going to say Masters of the Universe. But was there a time when munis were also yielding like 15, 16, 17%? And then with your tax advantage, you're getting 20% returns.
It was crazy. It was crazy. Since you asked, January of 1981. So, yes, I saw, I think the highest yields I saw were...
You came in at peak yields.
13.44% on a Washington Public Power Supply System new issue.
Wow.
Which, subsequently defaulted on $2.25 billion of debt. But, there were, yields in excess of in double digits. So, but even then, in those days, prices hardly moved. Prices were sort of a fiction anyway. You didn't have the MSRB transaction reports like you have now. The only thing you really could look at to judge how the market was moving was the blue list.
Yes, I remember that.
Which listed dealer inventory.
Dealer inventory is like the pink list for over-the-counter stocks, pink sheets. All right, Joe, you've got a story out here talking about a weird muni bond for tire recycler offers juicy yield, no risk. That sounds like a bond for me.
Now, this is a fascinating piece of the municipal market. Every year you have states come up with private activity bond allocations.
Activity bond allocations.
Right. They allow companies, in other words, private companies, to build new factories. So in this case, it's a tire recycler, but it's going to require a facility. So they have to build this, factory to handle used tires. And they're essentially, what they're going to do is sort of cook them down. And so states decide to boost economic development, they put aside a certain amount of the private activity bonds that they can sell, which is capped by the federal government. And they say, okay, you can sell, $100 million. In this tire recycler's case, you can sell $65 million in tax-exempt bonds. Okay. And this is, as I say, this is a way municipalities try to boost economic development.
Okay.
So every once in a while, and I would say probably weekly, I could find one of these deals where an issuer sells bonds, and you look at it and say, wow, this is for a tire recycler, this is going to carry some big yield, but it's not, because the bonds aren't backed by a tire recycler. They're backed by a pot of U.S. Treasuries, because these are placeholder bonds. They don't want their private activity bond allocation to expire, which it will at the end of the year unless they use it. So they use it. They sell these bonds that are backed by Treasuries, escrowed,
Is it a good one to buy?
For a year.
Is it a good one to buy?
Great, it's AAA rated.
All right.
It's backed by U.S. government securities.
Nice.
So it's not backed at all by any kind of project revenue, which is a scary thing.
All right, I'm buying it. It's AAA. So what I like about it is, all right, so it's a $65 million environmental improvement revenue bonds. Southampton County, Virginia, which it borders right on North Carolina's kind of southern part of Virginia. Now, this plant will, quote, Matt, demanufacture car and light truck tires into scrap steel, solid fuel, liquid fuel, and syringes.
Right, it's a needful thing.
It all comes full circle.
All comes full circle.
It's the circular economy.
And, it's a needful thing. So I always look at these recyclers, and I know to be skeptical, but I always root for them.
Sure.
I am currently destroying a set of tires on my Dodge Challenger RT Scat Pack wide body, and so that can then be recycled into the syringe I use to inject my Ozempic.
How long should a pair of tires go for?
It depends completely on the tires, but you can go, tens of thousands of miles on a set of tires.
But not you.
No, well, that's because I have a line lock function. So I basically, I put the car in drive, depress the brake, hold the OK button on my steering wheel, let go of the brake, drop the gas, and then let go of the OK button. And it leaves the front brakes on, and it allows the rear wheels to spin. And I just create a cloud of smoke.
And he does this in Westchester County, New York, folks, where his neighbors do not appreciate that. I'm just going to guess. Yeah. Joe Misek, guess what?
No, that's it?
That's it.
No.
Joe Misek, that's it for this week. That's it for Matt. He's not going to ever do a Focus in Munis again, I don't think. So this is it.
I'm going on paternity leave.
Going on paternity leave. And, it takes us, a couple years to do that. Joe Misek, editor Bloomberg Brief, joining us here from Bloomberg News, breaking down the municipal bond market. You can get some pretty solid tax-adjusted yields there. I'm going to have my guy, he's pitching me all the time, and I nibble from time and again. I'm the biggest creditor to the state of New Jersey, I like to think. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Let's get some company news right now. Elisa Mateo.
Thanks, Paul. Applied Materials is set for its biggest decline of the year. This is after a report that it allegedly violated export restrictions to China. Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld says the company is being probed by the Justice Department over dealings with semiconductor manufacturing.
Specifically, the DOJ is looking at here whether Applied Materials sold equipment to the Chinese chipmaker without the proper licenses. That revelation, it really overshadowed what had been generally upbeat earnings numbers from Applied Materials. It was a beat and raise quarter for the company, but those numbers and that probe news, it crossed at pretty much the same time yesterday afternoon.
Applied Materials is down about 5%. Sleep Number is calling itself a wellness technology leader. Bloomberg's Joan Doniger has that story.
Now it says a recommendation from a doctor to help with a medical condition, think sleep apnea here, might let you use your health savings account or flex spending account to help pay for a Sleep Number smart bed. Sleep Number has been struggling. Sales boomed during the early part of the pandemic, but sales of mattresses have fallen now, in part because they're often tied to home sales, and that's been frozen by mortgage rates.
All right, shares of Sleep Number, they're up about 2%. And from sleep loss to weight loss, Bloomberg reports if you're expecting weight loss pills to be cheaper and have fewer side effects, think again. Novo Nordisk's Rebel says a pill version of the diabetes shot that's often used for weight loss, it's already available at $936 for a 1-month supply. Well, Bloomberg reports more gastrointestinal side effects were found in trials of the highest dose of the drug than in studies of Wegovy injections. I'm Lisa Mateo. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Coming up to 11:22 on Wall Street, I'm Nathan Hager. The markets have placed their bets on an extended Fed pause. The November rally, it's on pause. We check the markets all day long here on Bloomberg. The S&P is down 2 points. Dow's down 21. NASDAQ down 28 points. 10-year Treasuries down 5/32. The yield 4.45%. 6 of the 11 sectors on the S&P 500 are in the green, led by energy up 1.8%. Communication services is down 1.1%. NYMEX crude is up 3% now, $75.10 per barrel. COMEX gold down about 0.1%, $19.8560 per ounce. The euro 1.0885 against the dollar. The yen is at 149.72. Biggest individual gainer on the S&P 500, Ross Stores up 8%. The discount department store chain beat on quarterly sales, boosted its earnings guidance. Applied Materials, the biggest laggard, down more than 5% for its worst drop since December of last year, with Reuters reporting it's under a Justice Department investigation. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller.
All right, Nathan Hager, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Matt Miller and Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. It is Friday, which means we ask, what is Matt Miller driving?
What am I driving this week?
Exactly. Kevin Tynan joins us. He's a senior autos analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence, so he can join in on this conversation. So, Matt, what are you driving?
So, first of all, I told you before, I'm driving an affordable SUV.
Okay.
That seems to be fairly solidly built. It's very green, and it's got great tech, and the brand is Ascendant. Ascendant. It's a brand that I think, this is why I wanted Kevin to join us, because I don't actually know how well they do, but I see more and more of them on the road, and I know that they have a really cool new logo.
Yep, like that.
And I'm talking about a Kia, obviously.
So
love
this is
the
a
new
Kia
logo.
Sorento?
It's been, a couple of years since they made that new logo, and I feel like it allows a whole new customer to buy into the story, because it just is a way to break.
Is it Korean?
To break from the past. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, when they first came out, Kias and Hyundais, you thought, okay, this is great, a $20,000 Econo box I can drive for a few years till it breaks. But now I think it's a very different story. Kevin, let me bring you in here and get your take on, the quality of these vehicles, the abilities of these vehicles, and, for example, the Telluride, the Kia Telluride. I feel like that could be cross-shopped with a Range Rover, and it costs like a third the price. So what do you think about Kia?
Yeah, that is an interesting story, because it's, the two brands, Hyundai and Kia, have moved from the entry and move-up market to higher price points and intensified their truck versus car mix. They were 43% truck as recent as 2018. Now they're 70%. So just think about what that's done for their average transaction price, their margin, profit and revenue contribution has been significantly stronger than it was when it was known as a Econobox brand. And what they did, that transition was really motivated and helped and advanced by the idea of the 10-year, 100,000-mile drivetrain warranty, right? So they had a
wow, 10 years and 100,000 miles
on the drivetrain.
Usually
right?
it's like 3 years and on the drivetrain. So a lot of times those will be 5 years and 60,000 or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So basically it gave people protection that said, if you have concerns about quality, here's how we're going to deal with that, and it's the best warranty in the industry. And then as they've moved up market, which if you think even about Tesla, right? Tesla comes in at the highest price points and then tries to move down. And every automaker tried to do that to gain scale and volume. Think about Mercedes moving down market and BMW moving down market. Hyundai Kia did it the opposite, right? They started at the bottom of the market, won loyal customers at the entry and move up level. That warranty was a big part of it, proved their quality had improved. And now there's even the Genesis brand, which is legitimately competing at the higher end of the market with the Land Rovers. But
Genesis is so Honda has Acura, and Toyota has Infiniti, Nissan has Infiniti, Toyota has Lexus, and Genesis is like Hyundai's version of that.
Yeah, because what happened was, there was a period where Hyundai Kia came out with full-size sedans to compete with 7 Series BMW or S-Class Mercedes, and people kind of laughed it off like there's no way I'm spending $75,000, $80,000 for a K900 Kia or a Hyundai Equus.
They wouldn't even do it for a Volkswagen Phaeton.
Right, so they created this new brand and put all the high-end stuff in there, and it's actually worked pretty well. My wife will, believe it or not, and she's a kind of strange, not car person, but will
Hopefully
only,
your wife's not listening.
only buy Hyundai. She will only drive Hyundai.
Really?
Yep, only
That's
drive Hyundai.
interesting. So she must be very happy about the progress they've made.
You mentioned Telluride, so she has a Palisade calligraphy, and it's almost like you can load that thing up with every piece of technology and the warranty and the whole thing, and you're still at a very, very reasonable price point.
And they look awesome. I mean, you must have seen the Kia Tellurides.
Oh, yeah.
Such cool-looking vehicles. Now, the Sorento doesn't look quite as cool, but it's got great features. For example, since it's a hybrid, there's a button, a physical button you can press to switch from full EV to hybrid EV. Or when you're turning left, and you can't, obviously there's a blind spot, but a screen in your dashboard shows you what's in your blind spot, same when you're obviously turning right. And it's got a center locking diff. Like it's got torque vectoring.
A what?
You can lock the center diff.
What's the diff?
Differential.
What's a differential?
In case you're, so that the wheels can move at different speeds, but if you're stuck in a place, you can make them all move at the same speed so that you can get better traction. It's got torque vectoring all-wheel drive, which is, I first heard about torque vectoring when I was a kid, I think reading Road and Track about a Porsche. So it's pretty impressive that Kia has this technology. I mean, they've really...
What's the price point, Matt?
I think it's $50,000 for the loaded up one, for the top trim. And
and if you think 48,000 is average in the industry these days, so right there, and that's the point, is that bang for the buck, you're getting all the technology.
Now they don't. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but they don't get a tax credit on the green vehicles like a Ford or a GM. Would, right? Because they're not a union shop, not made in the U.S., all of them. So
correct.
What's the story?
The rules of origin of the components and things like that. I don't have the, believe it or not, list memorized off the top of my head, but I believe that would be correct.
I pretty much do. So,
so Kevin, are the Korean and Japanese automakers, are they as committed to EVs as, I don't know, some of the others? I mean, it just seems. Give us a sense of where those guys are.
Yeah, they've been slower. Look, Hyundai Kia have EV5, EV6, Ioniq 5. So they sort of rushed into the segment a little bit. But what's interesting
with some
is
winners, I mean, the Ioniq 5 looks cool. The EV6 is fast. I made my buddy Mark White throw up by accelerating so quickly in that
good
thing.
To know.
But the thing with that is that what's interesting is that when you look at average transaction price across the brands, it's in the high 30s, right? So below the industry average. But then when you look at their EVs, they're above $50,000. So it's a way for them to sort of move up market. I don't think they're contented the way, say, a $50,000+ Telluride or Palisade would be. But people are willing to buy, or at least they were until very recently, willing to pay up for the electric versions of some of the Hyundai Kia stuff. We'll have to see how sustainable that demand is going forward. But it's very interesting that, that's an automaker that's known for, and that's a risk for the GM and Fords of the world as they move their average transaction price above $50,000, above the industry average. You're really squeezing out the entry and move up buyer, and you're saying like, hey, look, if you're not really ready to spend, we don't have product for you. And that's where the Asia-based manufacturers, Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Honda, sort of move down market, and they say, well, we're willing to take you, even if it means losing money on those entry-level vehicles, because we believe that we'll give you a good enough ownership experience that you'll stay with us up through the portfolio until you are ready to spend some money, maybe in the Lexus brand or Infiniti or Acura.
I mean, the Ford F-150, the most popular vehicle out there on the American roads, I mean, what does that list for? And can the average person afford?
You can get into one for 30.
You can get into a Ford F-150 for 30.
Yeah. But that's the lowest trim level,
Because I drove the E1 at $94,000.
Yeah, that was $100,000. My question is this. You can get, so the Sorento You can get into a BMW X3 for a comparable price, but I've seen people put BMWs up on lifts, and they're like over-engineered. They're so focused on stiffness and the driving experience. And I guess that has to do, like, in order to achieve that, you need the longevity, you need the experience in production, right? Kia and Hyundai, they're just not there yet.
Yeah, I think there's as a buyer, you would think about, do I want to buy, the lower end models of a premium brand, or do I want to buy the completely loaded version of a volume brand? And that's kind of the debate, right? So a decontented X3 versus a loaded Sorento, or, and people will have different opinions on that, but, you feel like even the ownership experience or dealing with the dealerships when you are, the big cheese when you roll it into, into the dealership or into the service bay, is like, hey, this is the owner that spent up for everything, as opposed to being at the bottom of the portfolio with a low content vehicle.
Matt's in there with the Kia Sorento. I got the BMW X3.
You got the loaded X3, I'm guessing.
Loaded X3. And Kevin, next time I'm down in Princeton, I'll show you the X3. It's good stuff. I'm very happy with it. That's Kevin Tiny, and he covers all the autos for Bloomberg Intelligence, a real gearhead in the best sense of the word. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. Amy Morris, she's got World and National News.
All right, thank you, Paul. New York Congressman George Santos now faces a third and more serious attempt to expel him from the House of Representatives. Bloomberg's Billy House on Capitol Hill.
The chairman of the House Ethics Committee, as an individual lawmaker, filed a resolution to expel George Santos from the U.S. House. This would be the third attempt, but now it has the weight of a House Ethics Committee report of findings that it describes as egregious misconduct.
Santos also faces a 23-count federal indictment on related charges in New York. President Biden has ended the immediate threat of a government shutdown, signing a temporary spending bill that extends government funding into early next year. Now, the president signed that spending bill yesterday while at the APEC summit, where he has spent the week focused on geopolitics. But recent polling from Bloomberg News and Morning Consult shows swing state voters are more focused on the economy than foreign affairs. Wendy Schiller is director of Brown University's Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy.
All the indicators are pretty good, and the recession that was supposed to be here now isn't here, and yet all of the attention is on global affairs. The Democrats are every day losing the opportunity to remind voters that this is the economy that Biden has brought them.
Brown University political scientist Wendy Schiller calls the Democratic messaging on the economy a stunning failure. Fallout from an Elon Musk post endorsing anti-Semitic views continues to spread, with more advertisers leaving his social media platform X. The White House now issuing a written statement condemning the post, saying, quote, "It is unacceptable to repeat the hideous lie behind the most fatal act of anti-Semitism in American history at any time, let alone 1 month after the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust." Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:40 on Wall Street. I'm Nathan Hager. Stocks are taking a bit of a break on this Friday from this month's $2.7 trillion equity rally led by bets that the Federal Reserve is done hiking interest rates to prevent a recession. Steve Cheverone, head of multi-asset solutions at Federated Hermes, says there is still room for gains in equities.
The equity market has hit an all-time high each of the last 5 times that the Fed has paused. Now, 4 of those ended in tears, but it still happened either way. And we think this rally has legs. I think the jury on whether or not, how soft this landing is next year is still very much out. But for the time being, we think this rally continues.
You can hear more from Steve Cheverone of Federated Hermes on the Bloomberg Surveillance podcast. We check the markets all day long on Bloomberg. Right now, the S&P is down 0.1% or 4 points. The Dow is down 0.1% or 44 points, and the NASDAQ is down 31 points. That's a drop of 0.2%. 10-year Treasury is down 6/30 seconds, yield 4.46%. The yield on the 2-year 4.91%. 7 of the main industry groups in the S&P are in the red right now, led lower by communication services. Energy is the biggest gainer. That's up 1.9% on the sector level. NYMEX crude right now is up 3.2%, $75.24 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate. COMEX gold is down 0.2%, trading at $1982.80 per ounce. The euro, 1.0876 against the dollar. The British pound, 1.2418. The yen, 149.85. Bitcoin's up 0.1%, trading right around 36,000. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller.
Nathan Hager, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Matt Miller, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We often talk to these folks at the Hennessy Funds, but this is the first time we get to talk to one of their managers about Japan. Masa Takeda joins us. He's a portfolio manager of the Hennessy Japan Fund. He joins us in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, coming all the way from Hong Kong, right?
Yes.
Okay. So talk to us about, I was telling you before we got on air, like when I started on Wall Street in the mid-'80s, if you wanted to ascend management on a big U.S. investment bank, you had to do a stint in Tokyo. That's how important Japan was to kind of global markets and so on. Then it kind of fell off the face of the earth. No growth, really no juice. But now I'm hearing more and more about Japan as an investment opportunity. Warren Buffett even talking about Japan. Can you give us kind of your overview of kind of investing in Japan today? Where are the opportunities?
Yes, so Japan has come a long way. It was in deflation for over 20 years now. But that is starting to change. The emerging signs of inflation, that's a good thing for Japan, unlike other parts of the world. And also, Japan as a stock market has been a huge laggard. Compared to the bubble peak in 1989, we hardly changed. And also, Japan is emerging as a geopolitically neutral country now. And that's attracting a lot of investments from all around the world. And then lastly, I think the improvements on corporate governance. It has been making slow but steady progress. A lot of impatient capital left Japan in 2015. But in the meantime, we've been making steady progress. And now Japan's return on equity is close to 10%. And now I see further upside. So there's a lot of excitement here now.
How important to the improvement of the economy and the business climate is the weakness in the yen? Right now, it's trading just under 150, which is, from my perspective, covering these markets for 25 years, that's very low. But Katsuo Ueda, the Bank of Japan governor, recently said it's hard to definitely say that a current weak yen is a negative for the economy. So is it really a positive?
Obviously, let's be honest, there are some pockets in the economy that are being hurt, like low-income households, they're feeling the pinch. But Japan is, it's still export-driven economy. So the exporters, I'm talking about global companies, world-class, they're definitely benefiting from this. And the other thing is, weak yen is obviously it's inflationary, and inflation is again something that we want to have. And this now the baton is being handed over to from the weak yen to internally generated forces like rising wages, among other things. I know the wages are currently, the real wage growth is still negative in Japan. So it's not clear yet whether Japan's inflation is going to be good inflation or bad inflation.
So talk to us just about the economy. Is the economy growing? If so, what's driving it, and what's the outlook?
So I think there are several tailwinds, growth sectors at the moment. The biggest one being probably inbound tourism.
Ooh, okay.
So Japan started promoting international tourism about 10 years ago. International tourist arrivals were only 8 million. Now, 2019, we hit 30 million.
Okay.
That's a lot of people, but not to the level of countries like Spain or France. So there's further upside. And each person was spending about $1,200 to $1,500 per tourist. Okay, so we're talking about $40 to $50 billion of GDP contribution back in 2019, but that went to zero during the pandemic.
Right.
Now it's coming back. So that's one big tailwind.
I was there a year ago.
Were you? How much did you spend?
It was awesome. I definitely met that.
Okay, good.
I definitely met that lower level bound there.
The other driving force right now is probably chip industry. So on the back of U.S.-China semiconductor trade war, Japan is emerging as a pure beneficiary. TSMC, Taiwan's semiconductor company, foundry, and even Micron of the U.S., they are making heavy investments into Japan to set up a new factory or expand capacity. And that's also attracting a lot of domestic investments like the suppliers, equipment makers. And we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in aggregate. So that's also contributing to some local economies.
I like my favorite brands come out of Japan for apparel, right?
Oh, yeah, like what?
The Real McCoys is like my #1 favorite brand. It's impossible to get here.
Doesn't sound Japanese.
It's very expensive.
Oh,
no,
okay.
because they use a lot of old production equipment that the U.S. got rid of after the Second World War. Samurai jeans, hands down, like the best jeans that you can buy. The denim is like indestructible. I like Mr. Freedom. I think this shirt's from Mr. Freedom. So,
all right. You learned something. I mean, probably our guests learned something here. All right, you guys like high-quality Japanese large-cap companies. Give us an example of a couple of names that you guys own and why you own them.
Yeah, so there are many different angles to look at it. I mean, from a pure consumer products point of view, since we just talked about clothing or apparel, Uniqlo.
Okay.
The company name is actually Fast Retailing. It's one of the largest clothing retailers, and people often like to compare them along the lines of Zara or H&M, but actually they have a very unique position where they produce high quality, reasonably priced basic clothing items. In the last 10 years, it's been pretty much about China growth story, and prior to that was about Japan.
Yep.
Now the next 10 years is going to be Europe and the U.S. And I know they're opening a lot of stores here in U.S. as well. So that's one example. Another world-class company, speaking of semiconductor, Tokyo Electron, we invested last year, September, October, when the chip-related stocks collapsed. Just like AMAT, it's one of the four largest semiconductor equipment companies. So without Tokyo Electron, we wouldn't have advanced chips.
Interesting. All right, so there's plenty to go there. I mean, we didn't even get to electronics, and which was again back in my day was kind of the driver there. You think about Hitachi and Sony and all those great companies. So appreciate Masa Takeda coming into our studio. Masa Takeda is a portfolio manager of the Hennessy Japan Fund. He's based in Hong Kong. First time back in New York in like 6 years. Good to have you back. Got to get back here more often. And I'm not thinking about going to Japan. That would be cool. I used to go there a lot.
You should hit up the Real McCoy store.
I should.
Highly recommend. You need a Shinky horsehide A2 jacket.
Sure. Who doesn't need that? I'll pick up one for John Tucker as well. So we'll see how that goes out. S&P 500 unchanged on the day. What else is new? We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. get some company news right now with Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Just trying to picture you in that jacket there, Paul. United Auto Workers, that's what we're talking about. Employees at Stellantis have voted overwhelmingly to approve a new labor contract. Now, that's according to the Wall Street Journal, who reports that the deal was supported by about 68% of Stellantis workers who voted so far. The new 4.5-year agreement includes a 25% base wage increase over the life of the contract. Now, Stellantis shares right now, they're up about 0.8%. A joint announcement from Amazon and Hyundai have sent shares of Carvana and some of the traditional car dealer chains like CarMax lower. Starting next year, consumers will be able to buy Hyundai vehicles on the e-commerce platform. Now, until now, shoppers have been able to choose cars on Amazon, but still had to be connected with the dealer to complete the purchase. We have Carvana right now down about 1.5%, CarMax down nearly 1%. Meanwhile, Hyundai and Kia are having a tough time escaping insurers' claims over their theft-prone cars. Several hundred insurance companies are looking to recover more than $1 billion in claims paid to drivers whose cars were allegedly easy to steal or vandalize. The Central District of California says that the insurers raise viable claims. And on the earnings front, Gap followed in the footsteps of Macy's and Target, posting a higher profit but lower sales. Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle.
It has everything to do with that profit. 210% better, 59 cents. Now, comp sales still did decline, but less than expected. The strength at Old Navy offsetting some of the weakness at Athleta and Banana Republic. They also did well in terms of inventories, managing inventories better, and fewer promotions.
Shares are up nearly 30%. I'm Lisa Mateo.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, looking at these markets, pretty much it's unchanged, I'm going to call it, pretty much for the most of these indexes here. That goes for the S&P and the Dow. No real change here. The Nasdaq's only down 0.1%. So it kind of mirrors the mood around here at the Bloomberg Global HQ.
There was no traffic this morning as well.
Nothing.
You know,
happening.
I thought I got a call and they were like, Tom Keene, he's not going to make the 9 o'clock. You got to get in here. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, just lazing around the house.
I don't know. So we're
rushed in. It took me like 35 minutes from Scarsdale.
I'll tell you who else is down in Washington, D.C. Amy Marsh is there. She's got World International News for us.
All right, thank you, Paul. President Biden has signed that stopgap spending bill, averting a government shutdown for now, putting off some spending fights until mid-January and others until early February. Wendy Schiller chairs the Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy at Brown University.
It looks now that the Republican leadership do not want to shut the government down, that they see a political cost. I mean, this has happened now twice, and they have not shut the government down. They clearly see this as a negative for them and their party going to 24.
Brown University's Wendy Schiller, but there are more spending fights to come. House conservatives are demanding deep budgets, and this stopgap doesn't include aid to Israel or Ukraine. A Washington Post Monmouth University poll finds former President Trump holds a 28-point lead in New Hampshire to win the GOP nomination for president. The poll also shows former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley rising to a distant second place. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who had been leading Trump at the beginning of this year in New Hampshire, has now lost ground there. He's running in fifth place. RSV infections are rising sharply in parts of the U.S., including Georgia, Texas, and Virginia. The federal government is responding with the release of 77,000 more doses of a new RSV shot for newborns. Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU is among the emergency departments, seeing a surge with more than 18 kids already hospitalized. Pediatrician Tiffany Kimbrough.
We've been seeing that kind of increase week over week since the beginning of October, and then starting to see those kids, coming into the office sick, some of them ending up in the emergency room, unfortunately, and some ending up admitted to the hospital, including our ICU.
Nationally, cases are about as high as they were last November, and predictions are that this season won't be as bad as last year. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg. Paul and Matt.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, this got my attention because everybody and their brother is moving down to Miami, South Florida, and God bless them. Have fun down there. I'll see you for a week or so down in January, February, but you can't live there. Miami's inflation ranks highest in the U.S. as newcomers pour in. Miami's rate at 7.4%, that's inflation, is more than double the U.S. average. And, of course, migration has brought more spending, higher housing costs. I don't know. First of all, Matt, I don't know where they're putting all these people. I mean, everybody was just booking out of New York and heading down to Miami. Mike McGlone from Bloomberg Intelligence, our commodity strategist, boom, he's down in Miami.
Right.
He was one of the first, so I'll give him credit there. But it's got to be inflationary on all types of things, services. I think tuitions for schools is one of the hard things I've heard about from people. There's not.
I
no
feel
place
for
to
them.
where are you going to put your kids?
I mean, but my 3-year-old, tuition for my 3-year-old costs, I think, definitely more than my high school tuition cost, and I think cost as much as my tuition at Denison University, my first ill-fated year at that school before I was given the boot. But yeah,
I mean, the question, first of all, folks, to get booted out of Denison is saying something.
They were done being a party school. That's what the dean told me. They're like, we don't need people like you around here.
The people who got booted out of Michigan, they went to Denison.
I will say, this kind of inflation is scary, but if it comes with an accompanying growth in, for example, pay, wages, then it's all good.
Yep. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the concern is it's going to be sticky inflation because the people aren't leaving. They're staying. And there's going to be this demand for goods and services there that is going to put pressure on prices. So it'll be interesting to see how they play it down there. And guess what? There's no income tax.
The Sunshine State.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike McClone, I always call him up in August when it's like 300 degrees down there. Saying, how's it going for you now? This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller.
Why were the economists so wrong? What are the economists getting wrong?
Isn't this a slam dunk time to buy U.S. Treasuries?
Soft landing, hard landing, no landing. I don't know.
True. What the heck does that mean?
I don't know.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
We're going to be in an environment with higher rates for longer.
The 5-day in-office work week is effectively dead.
It's definitely a good sign that we're not ready to land this economy just yet.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, coming up in this hour, we're going to check in with Phil Orlando. He's the chief equity strategist at Federated Hermes. What I like about Phil's call is you know exactly where he stands, if he's buying them or he's selling them. So that'll be good. C-suite conversation today. Norma Chu, CEO of Day Cook. DDC is the ticker. Talk about her company, just went public, and talk about the industry and the consumer outlook as well. Plus, retail sales. This is in studio. The number one retail analyst, in my opinion, on the street, Dana Telsley, coming in. She is the boss. She's the CEO and chief research officer at the Telsley Group. I got to ask her, I mean, holiday shopping, I haven't even thought about it yet. Are people buying stuff?
How is this consumer? Are we waiting for discounts?
Exactly.
You know, what's inventory look like?
What's the big item this year?
Exactly.
Tickle Me Elmo.
The G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu Grill. No. But first, let's kick it all off with John Tucker of Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, on this final trading day of the week, taking a bit of a breather, the major averages mixed to lower just for the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500, higher right now. Energy in the lead as oil prices rebound somewhat, still below 80 on West Texas. Communication services, the biggest drag, that's where you're going to find shares of Alphabet, Google delaying the release of the Gemini AI. The shares right now down about 2%. Meantime, Steve Schiaparoni at Federated Global Investments looking for stocks to rally even further.
We're getting that Fed pause rally, and that can be powerful. Historically, those are 9-month events, and you can see the equity market up 15, 20%. And interestingly enough, and this is something that's been on our mind, the equity market has hit an all-time high each of the last 5 times that the Fed has paused.
And United Auto Workers employees at Stellantis, they voted overwhelmingly to approve a new contract. S&P 500 right now just turned green, up a point, 45.09. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is 6 points lower. The NASDAQ 100 down 13 points, down about 0.1%. 2-year yield up 6 basis points, 490. The 10 is 1 basis point higher. That's at 445. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul, and I don't recognize the other guy.
The newly shaved.
You had to shave because it was...
There are a number of reasons.
Some we can go into, some we can't.
Okay.
I think here's the deal. So for one thing, I'm about to have a baby. And I think it's better to be clean shaven for at least the initial, contact. There's the whole skin to skin thing.
This is your public facing reason.
Exactly. And then internally, obviously, I feel like management wasn't sure if the beard look was clean enough to represent the brand. I think my takeaway is this will solidify opinion behind the idea that Matt Miller needs to have a beard.
Okay.
Because so I didn't realize I wasn't very good looking. And now I know.
So you're saying the more of your face that's covered up, the better for the rest of us?
Yes. I mean, I shaved initially. First, my daughter broke into tears, and then I was like, where's my chin? I don't have a chin? Why didn't anyone tell me I don't have a chin?
All right, so if you have an opinion on Matt, beard or no beard,
please,
just wire into
make your opinions
the management here at Bloomberg. So let's talk about these stocks because I'll tell you, Bailey, as John Tucker just reported, there is nothing going on with the indexes right here. I mean, literally no change. I can't remember a day when all the indexes were just kind of sitting there. The only juice is in the Russell 2000. That's up 1.1%, a little bit of a catch up there. What are you seeing under the hood, Bailey Lifschultz?
Yeah, as someone with a beard, fortunately enough,
lucky dog,
we are seeing some strength. So looking at retailers, I know you guys are going to talk to Dana Telsley, who is a genius rock star in my opinion. One of the companies she is equal weight on, Ross Stores, ticker ROST, right now up 7.8%. That coming after earnings beat expectations. Obviously, Matt, as you mentioned, all eyes will be on consumers, where they're spending, where they aren't spending. But it does seem like Ross Stores is benefiting from that. Company is the best performer in the S&P 500. You might want to point out, though, worth calling out, in my opinion, it's a $44 billion company. So this isn't completely small potatoes, bigger than the likes of Kraft Heinz, Truist, D.R. Horton, some of those other companies. Another stock that's on the rise, Gap, ticker GPS, soaring the most since June 2020. New CEOs, Old Navy rebounding, seeing strength with their flagship Gap stores. So in a week that has seen a number of retailers report as earnings season draws to a close, really NVIDIA, the only company left that is worth calling out, and that's on Tuesday of next week.
Why they wait so long?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
I haven't asked anyone.
I'm going to go ask. I'll ask the company on the conference call. Hey,
we can ask Dana why retailers wait so long to come out with earnings.
Sure.
You know, because I believe it is from the days of, you know, they had to actually go through the receipts, and with the, I don't know, the HP, Tom Keen's HP calculator, you know,
I've got
actually
HP 12C.
add up 12C there and figure out if they made money or not.
So I'll hold it up for everybody on the... Boom, that's how you go, baby. 1986 standard issue HP 12C from Payne Weber. What else you got?
Paying attention to a company called ChargePoint. They operate in the EV space, car chargers, down 35%. Sales missed expectations. CEO and CFO both out, so shaking it up at the top of that company. This is a stock that went public via SPAC. My
there you go.
Area near and dear to my heart, but down more than 80% in the last 12 months.
Any successful SPACs?
Oh, we have plenty of them.
Do we?
Yeah. DraftKings,
Okay,
trading
that's
at
a SPAC?
$38, went public via SPAC. Hostess Brands, which is being bought, went public via SPAC, or was bought.
So why am I just casting them about as bad vehicles, or is it just because the good ones went early and what we were left with was a lot of bad
Investors got crushed, right?
A lot of it was this
in the SPAC wave,
pie in the sky expectation. So you had the likes of Chamath Palihapitiya talking about how Virgin Orbit, the SPAC king, is Bloomberg helped.
I say
anoint him.
Palihapitiya.
Oh,
okay.
I don't know.
I couldn't tell you which one's right.
Chamath Palihapitiya.
Chamath. But so you had,
he had
more
like
than
7 SPACs, right?
He wanted one for every letter of the alphabet. He did not get to 26, I can tell you that much. But we had over 400 companies going public. The big thing was a lot of these were unproven companies, not generating cash flow, not really having a fleshed out business model. In 2020 and 2021, rates were low. People were very risk on. So you had a number of companies rushing out to get these deals. And then expectations mattered, and beating expectations would drive stocks, and if you can't,
and not all of them even found deals. A lot of them just had to give the money back, right?
A lot of them have shut down and liquidated. Colin Kaepernick had one. Kevin Durant's SPAC recently liquidated. Ken Moelis had one.
See,
Betty Lou had one.
Betty Lou's SPAC
right.
shut down. Yeah.
In the loop with Betty Lou. Back in the day when I was in this, thinking about SPACs and things like that as a banker. It was only for like major credible people. Like if Dr. John Malone, who is the cable cowboy,
the Darth Vader,
if he said, "Hey, go give me $1 billion," I'll go raise him $1 billion in 15 minutes, and you invest whatever you want to invest in because I trust you. I have faith in you. But Kevin Durant, I mean, that kind of stuff.
The thing that got tough is that having spent way too much time covering it, the SPAC is a sound investment from the standpoint of, like Boaz Weinstein, you buy it, you can leverage it, it's guaranteed, it's invested in T-bills. Most of these were topping off their funds, so you're getting 10 cents on your $10 investment up front, plus the return from interest, and you can cash out. The problem is, if 99% of investors are cashing out and taking their money, then the new company is getting a small fraction of the cash they thought they were getting, and then they go bankrupt.
So now we're back to kind of normal, which SPACs are few and far between.
Yeah, very niche. A lot of foreign companies are opting to go public via SPAC.
Okay. All right. Anything else we should be looking at out there?
Quiet into the weekend.
Quiet. All right. Very good. No worries about that. We'll just kind of move on here.
Hang on. What's your weekend project, Bailey?
New homeowner. We have to rebalance our radiators because I learned over the weekend that your thermostat takes the reading of the temperature, but it doesn't assess the different floors. So our upstairs is between 6 and 9 degrees cooler than our first floor. So it's very cold at night. So I will be spending the weekend using a thermometer going radiator to radiator to try to regulate that heat.
He's deep in it.
So it's steam heat?
Steam heat, yeah.
Now remember, the radiators, you can't turn them in the middle. So it's like to turn down the heat, you either have to turn it all the way off or it has to be all the way screwed to the right. Because anything in between, it's going to leak. People don't know that. But you can get
steam radiators?
Steam radiators, yes, sir. Keep that in mind.
You just threw a wrench into my weekend.
No.
I thought I was in the clear.
See, my friend Courtney Donahoe, when I got my house, gave me a tip for home ownership and upkeep. She said, ask John Tucker to do it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
he's very good. I had people for that. So Bailey Lipschultz, thanks so much. We appreciate that. Let's go right to our next guest, Phil Orlando. He's a chief equity strategist with Federated Hermes. Hey, Phil, we've had a really interesting November. I'll tell you, it seems like it's been risk on. It seems like people have said, hey, I think the Fed's signaling peak rates. How do you take it?
You're spot on. That's exactly our call. That we were looking for this 8 to 12% correction in stocks during the July, August, September, October period. We got it. Oversold down at the 4,100 level, and then the fundamentals started to improve, largely driven by the Federal Reserve. The Fed skipped a rate hike for the third time out of 4 meetings. Inflation is starting to come down. The rate of unemployment is starting to go up. The expectations for GDP growth are slowing. Our best guess right now that the Fed is done, that we've seen the last rate hike, and they are going to stay on hold until the back half of next year. Historically, stocks rip on pauses. And so this 10% rally that we've seen over the course of the last 3 weeks to our target of 4,600 at the end of the year is exactly what we were looking for. It's been a really powerful 3 weeks, but directionally, this is exactly what the market should do if we're right that the Fed has already seen their last rate hike.
I have a board, Phil, that I use on TV. It shows rates, it shows the dollar, and it shows oil, because I think all those things, if they're high, can be headwinds for U.S. stocks. Am I right in that? Like if we got rates down, also we get the dollar down, and we get oil prices down, does that mean we can see real growth for the stock market?
Agreed. And so those may just be coincidental. I think your board is spot on. This 10% rally that we've seen the last couple of weeks, we think has legs. We rally up to the 4,600 level by the end of the year on the S&P, and we think that rally continues up to the 5,000 level over the course of next year. So we think, we're sort of out of the woods in terms of the inflation Federal Reserve question. And now investors are starting to price in a more appropriate multiple and a broadening out of the rally. That the tech stocks, the growth stocks, clearly drove things in the first half of the year. We're starting to see large cap value stocks, small cap growth stocks, international stocks are doing better. Bonds have rallied. Benchmark 10s have gone from 5% to 440 over the course of the last month or so. As yields go down, multiples expand on stocks. So all of that is contributing to more favorable financial market conditions over the last couple of weeks.
All right, so Phil, it's mid-November. It's time to start looking forward to 2024. What do you think are going to be some of the key themes for 2024?
I think we're looking at this point, sort of a bifurcated barbell-shaped year. We think the first half of the year is going to be very strong as the market begins to develop greater confidence that the Fed, in fact, is done hiking rates. The Fed's going to stay higher for longer. We don't see the first cut coming until the back half of next year. As we get into the middle of the year, sort of that late summer, early fall period, I think you're going to see the normal election year chop as investors are going to start to attempt to price in what they think is going to happen with the election in terms of economic fundamentals, inflation, the rate of unemployment, GDP growth, et cetera. And then that post-election period, investors will have voted with their feet. I think we'll get a strong year-end rally as investors will be comfortable with whatever choice they've made November of next year. Good start to the year, choppy middle, nice end-of-year rally.
So you talked about maybe some breadth kind of getting a little bit better because, again, much of the gains in 2023 were, at least initially, in that first 6-7 months, driven by the Magnificent Seven. Can we really, in fact, start Well, I guess the question is, should investors be looking for maybe some of the names that did not participate?
Agreed. That powerful rally in the first 7 months of the year was driven by a half a dozen stocks. And you had all of these other categories that I mentioned were basically left for dead. Yet you look at some categories, healthcare, energy, you've got high quality stocks trading at, 10 times earnings with 4 or 5% dividend yields compared to some of these tech names trading at, 50 or 60 times earnings with very scant dividends. So we think this should broaden out. Small cap growth stocks, biotechnology has the pipeline's probably never been stronger. Yet investors are just simply not interested in them. That's something that we think should change. If we're right that the economy is going to slow down over the next 9 months or so, Treasury yields should probably go down. We're starting to see that happen. 10s have gone from 5% to 4.40 over the last couple of weeks. We could see, a move down to 4% over the balance of the year, maybe even a 3 handle. So there are and international stocks are trading 40, 45% cheaper than domestic stocks with a dividend yield north of 4%. The S&P 500 right now is yielding 1.5%. So there are places in the market that are offering terrific value that hasn't been exploited yet so far this year.
We know from the past month or two that single data points can really move the markets, or Fed speakers. What are you watching? What's on your radar that's key that we can't miss, Phil?
One of the things that I've been paying attention to with the increase in the rate of unemployment from 3.4% in April, which was a cycle low, to 3.9% that we just saw a couple of weeks ago. That's a 0.5% increase in the space of 6 months. All right, that triggers an arcane rule in the world of economics called the Somm rule. It was named after Claudia Somm, who is a former member of the Federal Reserve. And her seminal piece of work is that when the rate of unemployment rises by 0.5% or more within a 12-month period, that tells us that the economy is slowing down, maybe down into a recession. Yep. If that's right, directionally, Treasury yields should come down. They're starting to do that. That should expand price earnings multiples. That's starting to happen. And I think investors are going to, broaden out their focus from those half a dozen stocks that did really well and price in some of the other 492 that didn't do well.
That's right. All right, Phil, thanks so much for taking the time. We always appreciate getting your perspective. Phil Orlando, he's a chief equity strategist with Federated Hermes, giving us his call. He's bullish into year end. So that is good news. This is Bloomberg. Let's get some company news right now with Lisa Mateo.
Thanks, Paul. IBM has pulled its advertising off the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. A report found that ads for the company showed up next to pro-Nazi posts on the social media site. Now, IBM issued a statement saying it has zero tolerance for hate speech and discrimination. Shares of IBM right now, they're up just a fraction. And now this morning, an executive from X emailed Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow to respond with this.
X has done a sweep of those accounts that Media Matters had found associated with the offensive content. Those accounts will no longer be monetizable. In other words, ads won't show up against those accounts that they did a sweep of. But this is the bit that X is pushing back on. They're telling me that X is not intentionally placing a brand next to this type of content. It is completely based on the user who is trying to view the content.
So basically, in this case, the user is Media Matters researchers who were seeking out those posts for their analysis. But Musk has even more issues to deal with after his endorsement of an anti-Semitic post on X is sparking concern with Tesla investors. Now, Tesla shares, they were down. Right now, they're up about 0.7%. And even the White House called Musk's actions, quote, unacceptable and abhorrent. And speaking of the White House, Axios is reporting President Biden's re-election campaign has been thinking about joining TikTok in order to reach more younger voters. Now, most Republicans have avoided the social media app over data security concerns because it's owned by Beijing-based ByteDance. But Democrats have been split on the issue. Those are the company stories we're following this hour. We'll have more Bloomberg Markets in just a bit. I'm Lisa Mateo, and this is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Little movement in the major averages as we wrap up the trading week. The small caps, looks like that's where the action is right now. The Russell 2000 up 1.2%. Now, the smaller cap stocks, they're kind of benefiting from this narrative about slowing rate of inflation, even deflation. Best performing individual stock in the S&P 500, a retailer, Ross Stores, up close to 8%. The discount department store chain reporting third quarter comp sales that beat estimates. Right now, the worst performing stock in the S&P 500 belongs to Applied Materials. That's down about 5.5% right now. It's a 35% plunge for ChargePoint Holdings, the electric vehicle charging company, replacing its CEO and the CFO after they posted disappointing quarterly revenue. Right now, the S&P 500, it is up just 2 points, about 10% below the average trading, the volume at this time of day. Dow Jones Industrial Average 5 points lower right now, and the NASDAQ 100 down 11 points. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Matt and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Matt Miller, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. So you got that going. Our C-suite conversation of the day is with a newly public company. We're joined by Norma Chu. She is the CEO of Day Cook. The New York Stock Exchange symbol is D as in David, DC. Went public today, sold 3.9 million shares at $8.50 a share. The stock's trading right around $6 right now. Norma, thanks so much for joining us on a busy day for you guys. Can you tell our audience kind of what Day Cook is? What do you guys do over there?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me today. I started the business about 12 years ago, and the whole concept was really to create a platform and brand that can encourage the younger generation to enjoy cooking at home. And right now, we are a food innovator, and we own a portfolio of brands. And all of our brands basically provide ready-to-cook and ready-to-heat product solutions. We also do a lot of social media marketing, building brands and promoting products, and also engaging with our customers.
All right, so I have been cooking a lot this year. What do you have for me? What are the products? Give us some examples.
Sure. Since even though I had started the business out of Hong Kong a long time ago, last year we started looking into the U.S. market. This year we just completed our very first acquisition of a brand called Nona Lim. So Nona Lim, you can find her products right now in Whole Foods, Kroger, Target, and also a wide selection of online e-commerce platform. You can probably try some of our noodle starter kits and also a variety of bone broths. Coming up next, we do have a shelf-stable, clean label cup noodle coming to the market. So hopefully you enjoy those as well.
So talk to us about how your business, I guess, was impacted during the pandemic, because I would think everybody was cooking at home and there was a lot of demand for, easier ways to cook at home. How did that impact your business?
Yeah, that is so true. I started about 10 years ago, and at that time, I think a lot of people still wonder, will the younger generation enjoy cooking at home? But since the past few years, I think there are a lot of different trends that we're seeing, which is really driving the growth for our market. The first one is really structural change in consumer behavior. I think a lot of younger consumers now do want to cook at home, but they want a convenient, delicious meal with minimal effort. Second thing, I think is really the whole work at home social trend. So in general, a lot of families are cooking probably 6, 7, or 8 more meals at home now, and that's also really helping our space and really driving the growth that we're seeing.
How have you dealt with food inflation? Are your input costs continuing to rise, or have you seen a turnaround?
Well, the good thing is, we are an asset-light model, so we work with a number of, manufacturers and experienced partners. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility in terms of, sourcing and manufacturing. And the beauty is, this year and looking ahead, we do have a very aggressive plan in terms of growing internationally. And the nice thing is, in markets like the U.S., Europe, and other parts of the world, we are seeing such strong demand for our product, which really enable us to price our products with healthier margin. So that's also having a positive impact on our business.
So geographically, where do you do business these days, and what's kind of your future look like?
Yeah, so I started in Hong Kong in 2012, and then we expanded into mainland China market. Not last year, we started looking into the U.S., and this year with the very first acquisition that we just completed. So we are targeting about 10 to 15% of revenue coming out of the U.S. market this year. And looking ahead, we're targeting 30% in 3 years' time, 50% in 5 years' time of international sales.
So I'm just looking at your stock again, $6 a share. It went public this morning at $8.50. Any idea what's kind of pushing the stock down here? Have you heard from your bankers or anything?
Well, I used to be a stock research analyst,
there you go.
Yeah, so I typically don't get too hung up on the day-to-day, performance of the stock. I'm more a fundamental research analyst, so I would believe in focusing on our business plan, continue to execute, and the stock will just perform on its own.
And the proceeds, I guess, are for acquisitions. That's how you plan to expand?
That's right. A big portion of it is continue to drive business growth, and within our growth strategy, really is looking at M&A transactions, M&A opportunities to help us establish a more international footprint, and also continue to grow our multi-brand product portfolio.
So, I mean, you talk about the younger folks. I actually agree. I mean, when I was younger, coming out of college, I never cooked. But the kids today, and maybe it's just because of the pandemic, I mean, they're cooking and they're going all in. I mean,
yes,
major ingredients. True. I mean, it's just, I mean, is that kind of the market you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so exciting that now I think the younger generation do feel cooking with a lot of passion. And it just makes me so happy to see that, because, I mean, cooking has always been a passion for me. But, when I look at this space, I think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of creating clean label products. And that's also one of the criteria that we look for when we look at more growth opportunity. Because I think, traditionally, some consumer might think that Asian food products may be a little bit more processed, maybe a little bit more heavy on the sodium. But if you look at the brand that we just recently acquired, which is Nona Lim, once again available at Whole Foods, Target, and Kroger, all of the products are clean label. So we really care about the type of ingredients that we use, into our manufacturing process.
All right, thanks very much for joining us. Norma Chu, she's the CEO of Day Day Cook, symbol DDC is a ticker symbol. They just went public today. Going to be ringing the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange later today, so that's exciting for any new company. We appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. I don't know. I have to be honest, Matt. I mean, I go out most times for dinner.
Right.
Not,
well,
I mean,
but I got to say, I've been cooking at home more and more often just because it's so much fun. And it's also like, with a daughter and another on the way, I'm not really allowed to be ordering takeout and stuff. Like the wife doesn't allow that. She will steer me towards clean label products as well. So,
really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this kid has to eat all natural and can't have any hormones. And the chickens have to have their own, backyard. And
you have to get to know the chickens before
exactly.
they're executed.
We need to have a good relationship. So, but it's great fun.
Now,
to be honest,
I mean, Spanish food, or because your wife's Spanish?
My wife cooks some Spanish food, but to be honest, I do most of the cooking.
Really?
So, yeah, I have a few signature dishes. I do a great spaghetti carbonara, for example. I have a nice breaded chicken that I make with cornflakes.
Breaded chicken with cornflakes?
Yeah, so it's crunchier, instead of
an Ohio thing there, John.
Instead of using breadcrumbs, I'll use crushed up cornflakes.
Like Frosted Flakes?
No, not frosted. The healthy kind. So, but yeah, I'm going to have another baby here, like today or tomorrow or Sunday. So I won't be back.
I know you're not going to be back. You're bailing on us for 6 months. Are you going to can you fit a second car seat in the Scat Pack Challenger?
So I've looked, and I can fit 2 car seats as well as me. The problem is the car seats have to be rear facing.
Yeah.
So if they're behind my seat, I can't drive because I don't have enough leg room. So, but I can put one in the back, be on the passenger seat, and then one in the passenger seat. No. But in order to do that, I have to pull a fuse
for the airbag,
so that the airbag doesn't go off.
Yeah. All right. I say this is what we do, and I think John will agree with me here. We get rid of the Challenger and we buy a minivan.
Yeah,
that's the way.
No, that's the way to go. Matt, that's the responsible thing to do.
Yep.
definitely not going to happen. I'm willing to shave my beard, but I'm not willing to get a minivan. By the way, the good news is while I'm on paternity leave, which
6 months,
this company has fantastic policy, and it's great because I'm the primary giver. If you're a parent and you're not a primary caregiver, you're doing something wrong.
Wow.
But
strong read there.
one of the great things is I'm going to be able to keep coming in and doing my podcast. Now, I started a new podcast with Hannah Elliott. Elizabeth, you got the board there? You can put up the full screen so that if people are watching on YouTube, they can see our little logo. It's called Hot Pursuit.
Yep.
And Hannah Elliott is our luxury car guru out on the West Coast. I like the muscle cars and the trucks here on the East Coast. I drive the lower price vehicles as well. And a lot of times we'll have great guests. Barry Ritholtz joins us from Masters in Business. He's also a car collector. A couple weeks ago, we had the CEO of Ducati North America, which is fantastic. So we'll keep doing that podcast. I'll keep recording it. The new one drops every Saturday morning.
Right.
And I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, so you got the Kia Sorento this week. Anything on the...
Well, next week, so normally I'll try and test drive a new car every week. Not quite, but almost every week. Next week, I'm going to take a week off because...
That's right. I think you're having a kid.
We're getting a new baby, so I'm not going to be
Shop
able
for
to
the
get
minivan. Okay.
away.
Well, John Tucker and I will go out. We'll get you a minivan, something like that, like the Plymouth or Dodge or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
The Chrysler Pacifica?
Oh, we had the Honda Odyssey for 25 years.
The Honda Odyssey, the
that is
Toyota
awesome.
Sienna is a very popular choice.
That's very good. We went Honda Odyssey was just awesome because we had that for literally 20 plus years.
Yeah, my dad has one. He likes that. He calls it the trip car. And actually, I say he owns it, but the kids always use it. But there are a number of minivan options that I'm not gonna buy. I'm telling you, I will. My wife has her SUV. I tried to sell her on a BMW M760, slightly used with the V12, and she initially was kind of open to the idea, but now has said no. She needs a SUV because I guess suburban moms have to have an SUV. I don't know why. She feels like sitting higher is helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
But now I'm honing in possibly on the BMW X5 M50i.
Wow. That would be solid.
It's got a twin turbo V8, ZF 8-speed transmission, and
just what the wife needs.
Could be the sweet spot.
All right, let's refresh kind of what's happening out there on the markets. Go to John Tucker. He's got a Bloomberg Business Flash for us.
All right, gentlemen. Stocks wavering between gains and losses today. S&P 500 about 10% in terms of the trading volume, 10% below the 30-day average this time of day. Well, stocks have come a long way in the last 3 weeks. During that time, S&P 500 has gained roughly 9.5%, while the NASDAQ is up more than 11.5%. The Dow up about 7.5% during that time. Mohammed El-Arian of Queens College, Cambridge says, you know what, investors have almost universally latched onto a new narrative.
The market has now fully embraced not just that the Fed has finished its hiking cycle, which I think is correct, but that we're going to see deeper and deeper cuts next year without a recession. And that's the critical assumption that's now built in across markets.
Right now, the S&P 500 is pretty much unchanged, 4508 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is 11 points lower. The NASDAQ 100, 20 points lower. And we'll call this a deflationary sign here. We have the best performing index, the small caps. The Russell 2000 is up 1.2%. This is Bloomberg.
connection lost.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Major averages, they are mixed right now after this week's rally, taking something of a breather today. In the S&P 500, volume is about 10% below this time of day. 6 of the major industry groups in the S&P 500 are higher, 5 are lower. Energy, the best performing group right now, is oil rises today, still just around $75 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate. And communication services, that right now is the biggest drag. Amazon, the leader, ExxonMobil, Broadcom, Eli Lilly, leaders in the S&P 500 right now. And the laggards, they belong to Microsoft, Alphabet, and Apple. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Matt and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Matt Miller, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. We're streaming live on that internet thing. I think it's youtube.com is where you go. That's the internet, I'm told. And search Bloomberg Radio, and that's where you'll find it. We've just been kind of going through this week a lot of retailers putting out some numbers here, some hits, some misses. A lot of folks want to get a sense about going forward, and I think the management teams have generally been pretty cautious, it seems to me, as I kind of read through some of the transcripts, but who cares what I think, because we have Dana Telsley in studio. She's got her own firm, Dana Telsley. She kind of runs that, and I'll tell you what, not only is she one of the best analysts covering retail on Wall Street, and that's been proven by all the polls and magazines over the years, but what I admire most is she's left a big Wall Street bank, set up her own shop when that was pretty rare at the time, as I remember. And that's number one. It was rare. And number two, she's been successful at it. Even more rare, because I've seen a lot of folks that are highly ranked leave the big seat, go set up a shop, and it just doesn't work. But she makes it work.
Enough with the flattery.
It's good stuff, man.
By the way, Dana, I heard a stocks reporter on the other side of the office call you a genius today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I don't think you can top that.
So Dana,
why let's first ask the question, because this is the first earnings season I've really noticed how many of the retailers are at the back end of the earnings calendar. And is there a reason for that? Is that just traditional?
It's tradition. I mean, typically retailers are on a January fiscal year end. And the reason why is because December is typically one of their busiest months. So you need the month after January in order to put everything together. Plus, you got to get rid of the returns in January, so you really know what your inventory looks like at the end of January going into the following fiscal year.
And you just thought they were lazy. I don't know.
They're not lazy.
So, all right, Dana, so we've kind of getting through the meat of this most recent quarterly earnings period. What were your takeaways from the quarter itself, and more importantly, looking forward a little bit?
I think the big picture takeaway overall is that we have a very discerning consumer, that we have a consumer who's moderated their spend at almost all income levels. And what we're seeing is that retailers, the execution has improved. Everyone's inventory levels are clean. They're cleaner than what they were. At the same time, we're going to have a more promotional holiday season this year as compared to last. And when you look at the cadence so far, October sales growth was slower than September by around 100 basis points or so. And going into November, it's remaining the same as October. Consumers are waiting for big events. And we know that a lot of the discounting, because it's more promotional this year than last year, even though still less than 2019. But what we do know is they wait for the events. We had Prime Day in October. Black Friday isn't going to be what it used to be. And with Christmas falling on a Monday, the procrastinators can wait until Saturday and Sunday.
John Tucker, there you go. We'll just look at you.
So more promotional this year than last year? I keep seeing in earnings releases that they're controlling inventory well, or if sales fall, at least they're managing their inventory. Why are they going to be discounting?
Couple things. You need to discount in order to drive the consumer to get them to convert. Last year you had too much inventory in many instances given the supply chain issues that you had. And right now, some of the price increases from inflation, they're undergoing a little bit of a rollback. But the focus on experiences versus goods, we all know what Taylor Swift did during the summer in terms of boosting spend when she was here in the US. You have to give the consumers not only the what to buy, but the how to buy. And one of the things we're seeing, the retail experience, it's a social experience too. So watch the physical stores, they're not going away.
That's kind of where I wanted to go, because I had a hard time getting to my subway last night, because out in front of Bloomingdale's, they had a big stage set up right in the middle of Lexington Avenue. And I think there's some Broadway show, the cast can come and sing a song. So that's an event,
Holiday
right?
Windows. There was the Holiday Windows.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. I did make it to the subway. So talk to us about the retail store, because there was a narrative that I bought into that e-commerce is going to replace everything, no more stores, thing of the past. Where are we today in that thinking?
That was pre-pandemic thinking.
Yes.
The pre-pandemic thinking of there are too many stores and Amazon's going to take over. Well, pandemic happened, and look, Amazon didn't take over everything. Too many stores, you bet, and we had a ton of closures post the pandemic, so that now many retailers' store bases, they're more productive, they're in the right locations, and they've even resized a lot of them. And the other narrative used to be, oh, there are too many retailers, they need to go bankrupt. Well, they did. We had 96 consumer companies go bankrupt right during and post-pandemic. So where you are today, fast forward, we have better stores. You look at 4 new stores that are opening in Manhattan for Black Friday. Take a look at the Wegmans that just opened on Astor Place. Take a look at Crate & Barrel that opened their first new store in Manhattan in 30 years on Broadway. Lululemon's remodeled store on 5th Avenue and 17th Street. And then you also have is Wegmans, it's Lulu, it's Crate & Barrel, I got one more. I got to think about the other one.
What's the deal with Brooks Brothers? Because I'm sure, like me, Paul grew up going there. When I got my first suit, it was at Brooks Brothers. I remember going to store number 1 to get fitted for a formal coat when I was like 5. It was the best place to shop for men's clothes. I mean, really an experience. My grandfather got his World War II, his dress blues at Brooks Brothers. Why did they go bust, and what's happened to them?
Couple things. First, it's Target. That's the 4th new store that opened on 14th Street. Let's go to Brooks Brothers. So look at what everyone's wearing here today.
Yep.
Are any of the 3 of you men in a suit?
Not really.
No.
Okay. What did Brooks Brothers sell a lot of?
Suits, yeah.
Okay, there you go. So you got to pivot in order to be able to reinvent yourself. Retailers can do that. We've seen retailers reinvent themselves. You look at Coach, reinvented itself. You look at Levi's, been around 150 years, reinvented itself. So the fact that if you don't reinvent yourself, it's hard to keep such an expensive piece of real estate. Now they have a coffee shop there. I meet a lot of people there. It's my destination for meetings.
Wow, that's cool. It was a sweet spot.
Brooks Brothers down in the Shrewsbury Mall, down the shore.
I now go to Paul Stewart, which is next door.
The no iron shirts are like classics. Well, this isn't a Brooks Brothers, but you get the picture.
I get
Love
the picture.
those.
The place was a classic place.
Well,
Now, the other thing, I typically eschew the word barbell. It's like the most cliche phrase on Bloomberg television. Okay. But I've noticed that Macy's, for example, Bloomingdale's did better than all of Macy's, and Macy's has some kind of off-brand or lower cost backstage, which did much better. So it seems like the higher-end consumer is doing well, and then everyone else is going downscale. Is that the case?
Well, when you look at the uber wealthy, Hermes had double-digit sales gains, so they're certainly doing well.
George Santos apparently was shopping there with campaign funds, allegedly.
Very good.
Yeah.
And when you look at the lower end, take a look what you got this week. TJX with same-store sales up around 6%. You look at Ross stores yesterday, their same-store sales were up around 5%. Value works, and you see many retailers talking about the fact that their outlet stores are performing. Look at Tanger Factory Outlet Centers, and you've seen newness there with their new Nashville opening that they have. So there's a little bit of a barbell, but even that luxury consumer, except for the tippy top, is moderating. Look at Burberry's results yesterday where they talked about the fact that they've seen a slowing in global luxury demand. So whether it's the macro, whether it's the stock market volatility, or if focused on experience versus goods, and certainly for the mid-tier and lower, higher interest rates and inflation are an inhibitor to opening your wallet.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Dana, thank you so much for joining us here. Dana Telsley, CEO and Chief Research Officer at the Telsley Group, kind of giving us a breakdown on what's happening in the world of retail. Nobody does it better. I don't know. I don't know what the big thing is. I'm just going to give my
What is the
cash.
big thing? I mean, I remember when it was a Cabbage Patch Kid, when it was Tickle Me Elmo. Do they still have that, like the big thing to get for Christmas? Is that a thing, Dana?
Real quick, Dana.
Yes, you have some of those things that are still a thing, but not as big as they were.
See, yeah. I guess I don't know. What do you get, John Tucker? The guy who's got everything. I mean, what do you get the John Tuckers of the world?
You can
I don't
give
know.
me a raise if you
Just
want.
give him a raise. Give some cold hard cash. All right, that's it for Bloomberg. We're coming back. This is Bloomberg. Let's get some company news right now with Lisa Taylor.
You got it, Paul. Amazon is laying off hundreds of workers in its Alexa division. A memo to employees seen by Bloomberg says it's to focus on building capabilities powered by generative AI. Amazon shares right now, they're up about 1%. Applied Materials is set for its biggest decline of the year after a report that it faces an investigation for allegedly violating export restrictions to China. Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld says the company is being probed by the Justice Department over dealings with semiconductor manufacturing.
Specifically, the DOJ is looking at here whether Applied Materials sold equipment to the Chinese chipmaker without the proper licenses. That revelation, it really overshadowed what had been generally upbeat earnings numbers from Applied Materials. It was a beat and raise quarter for the company, but those numbers and that probe news, it crossed at pretty much the same time yesterday afternoon.
Shares are down right now about 5%. Ross Stores reported sales that beat estimates and boosted its EPS outlook for the year. Bloomberg's Simone Foxman has the numbers.
Comp sales up 5%. The expectation was for about 3.1%. Profits for the quarter beat as well, and the company was able to boost its profit outlook for the full year that ends in January, now seeing $5.30 to $5.36 a share, had been $5.15 to $5.26.
Right now, Ross is up about 8%. And shares of BJ Wholesale Club, well, they're lower. They're down right now about almost 3%, even as third quarter earnings beat Wall Street expectations. Now, the focus shifted to the retailer's updated full-year guidance, which reflects lower comp sales growth. Those are the company stories we're following this hour. More Bloomberg Markets in just a bit. I'm Lisa Mateo, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Matt Miller and Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Again, the story is the same. You look at the indexes, and it is just weird how there's just no movement whatsoever one way or the other. So just kind of very, very tight range here on this Friday before Thanksgiving. The only place where we're seeing any movement really is on the small cappers. The Russell's up 1.25%, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Even in other assets.
Yeah.
Look at the 10-year.
Well,
completely unchanged at
completely
4.44.
on the 10-year, and we got that's yielding 4.44%. You want to get some volatility, go look at oil, up 3.9%, a little bit of a bounce back after a big, big sell-off down to the low 70s. That's now at $75.70. And Bitcoin, I'll call it out for Tom Keene, because I know he's enjoying a surveillance beverage of his choice. It's up 1.5%, 36,500 on the Bitcoin. Right now, let's get world and national news in New York City with Leslie Lotto.
Thanks, Paul. Multiple reports say Israel and Hamas appear to be near a hostage deal. The deal would free 50 women and children for the return of Palestinian prisoners. The exchange would coincide with a 3 to 5 day ceasefire. Reports have yet to be confirmed. Fallout from an Elon Musk post on X endorsing anti-Semitic views continuing to spread, with Tesla investors criticizing the billionaire and the White House as well. More advertisers fleeing the social media platform. Here's more from Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow.
In that post, Musk agreed with another user's post that said that Jewish people had a dialectical hatred of white people, and Musk also responded saying, "You have said the actual truth."
That's Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. The European Commission joined IBM in announcing it will stop advertising on X. IBM reacted to a report from Media Matters showing its ads along with ads for Apple, Oracle, Comcast's Xfinity brand, and the Bravo TV network running on X next to pro-Nazi posts. Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai says that he expects China to be, quote, at the forefront of AI, and says it's important for the U.S. to collaborate with the Asian nation on both regulation and innovation.
My sense is there is no way you make progress over the long term without China and the U.S. deeply talking to each other on something like AI. So I think that has got to be an integral part of how you make progress.
Speaking of Bloomberg, at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference, APEC, in San Francisco, Pichai saying that the scale of AI work in China, quote, is just astounding to see. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Leslie Lotto, and this is Bloomberg. Paul?
All right, Leslie, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Leslie Lotto with our update there. Hey, Matt, every year the U.S. Marshal Service seizes tens of millions of dollars worth of fun collectibles and fast rides from criminals, and then lets the general public do some bidding. So Bloomberg Business Week has got some great story here as they kind of go look and see what kind of stuff gets sold. Art collections, financial assets, household stuff. There's watches, there's cars. A Rolex watch, $33,000. Collection of Hermes bags, $16,000. A Steinway piano, $34,000. Oh, and a plane too, 1994 Raytheon Hawker. That's $405,000.
That's awesome. I mean, this is a great story, and the way Business Week has laid it out on the website is very cool because you can see not only have the marshals gotten more and more money every year from auctions in 2018, they got $12 million, 2019, $22 million, 2020, $21 million, and now they're getting, last year they got $81 million from auctions. So it just keeps getting higher and higher. They take that money and they pay it out to victims and claimants. In the fiscal 2022, they paid $506 million to victims and claimants from sales in the previous years. But I just feel like it would be a great place to get some stuff.
Well, how about this? This is for you. 1991 Ferrari F40, $760,000. For me, it would be the 2014 Ferretti yacht. It's a 100-foot. It's named Navigante, $3.2 million. That, I pull that up into the Brielle Marina. How about that, John?
I got one for Tucker.
Yeah.
14 bottles of Screaming Eagle wine from various vintages, $30,000.
Let's do it. We can afford that.
That's a party. This is Bloomberg.
Now, from our nation's capital, this is Bloomberg Sound On.
Two major stories that we're following here developing before our eyes.
What does it say about Trump's influence on the Republican Party?
What can the Biden administration do on its own to support Israel?
Bloomberg Sound On. Politics, policy, and perspective from D.C.'s top names.
The Republican caucus is at war with itself. Members of Congress would have a press conference every day if somebody would cover that.
There is bipartisan support for Israel.
This is one of the big ones we only see once every decade or 2 decades in the Middle East.
Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
Israel says it found a tunnel under the hospital in Gaza. Welcome to the fastest show in politics as Tel Aviv responds to pressure from around the world to justify troops entering the hospital, with new polling now showing a big shift in sentiment among Americans when it comes to Israel's war with Hamas. We'll have the latest from the region and discuss with Hadar Susskind, president and CEO of the group Americans for Peace Now. Next week could be the last one in Congress for George Santos. And another poll shows Nikki Haley on the rise in New Hampshire. We'll talk about all these stories with our signature panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us for the hour, and it's all after a look at Wall Street. Let's get up to date on the markets now with the help of John Tucker in New York. Hey, John.
I don't want to say boring. I'll never say boring about what we do, but S&P 500 3 points higher right now. It does remain above 4,500, Joe, heading toward its longest streak of weekly gains since the month of July. Now, the rally in stocks this month has added, get this, $2.7 trillion in market cap. Call this maybe a deflation play. Small caps are higher. Russell 2000, that's where the action is today. Russell 2000 right now up 1.3%. Meantime, Nadia Lovell at UBS remains bullish of equities.
You know, the rally has been fast and furious, and we do recognize they could stall out, but we're taking a little bit more of a longer-term view in terms of into 2024, and we think that there are still good fundamental reasons for this market to trend modestly higher. When you think about it, you have earnings that are set to reaccelerate.
Traders also gearing up for some earnings from retailers and tech companies. That starts next week. Best Buy, Nordstrom, Lowe's, they're set to post slumping sales, while NVIDIA's quarterly results could still exceed the sky-high investor expectations. Right now, the NASDAQ 100 just 2 points higher. The S&P 500 has turned higher, just 3 points higher, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 21 points. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. We made it to Friday. I can't believe it.
Me neither. It's been a really long week. John, thank you. Great to have you with us again. On the Friday edition of Sound On, welcome. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where it is a ghost town. The House and Senate are out. President's still in San Francisco. He's going to Delaware later tonight for the weekend. It's a Thanksgiving feel. Actually, there's a Christmas tree across the street from the Bureau, so I don't know. Maybe we're just fast-forwarding through this whole thing. So thanks for being with us, whether you're on the radio, on the satellite, or on YouTube. Find us on YouTube now. Search Bloomberg Global News. And I'll remind you later to subscribe to the podcast because we've got a lot of good stuff we're packing into 2 hours here, beginning with what's happening in Israel. On the terminal, the latest story that we're following has to do with relief in Gaza. Israel says it will allow 2 diesel tankers per day into Gaza to support water and sewage system, prevent an outbreak of disease. And this is happening, of course, against the backdrop of, in many cases, door-to-door fighting with the IDF, trying to rid Gaza of Hamas. And it brings us to the situation at the hospital in Gaza. Now, this has been going on for days. We've talked about it here, IDF troops entering the hospital. And we even had the minister of the economy from Israel tell us here on Bloomberg they believe that a Hamas headquarters was below that hospital. And Israel has been under a lot of pressure to justify this move. They're out with a video now showing a tunnel that they discovered. The opening, the entry point, yes, in the hospital, as troops try to neutralize this threat and also protect civilians and patients inside. The director of the Al-Shifa Hospital giving us some numbers here. There are still more than 650 patients, 500 medical staff, and 5,000 displaced people all in that hospital. Can you imagine what it is like in that building? As troops also do their work there on behalf of the IDF. And now that we're seeing video of this tunnel, I can only imagine what's happening next. But the WTO, the World Trade Organization, says we have a problem here. They've recorded at least 137 attacks on healthcare in Gaza, where now 9 out of 35 hospitals are partially functioning. According to Palestinian health authorities, the rest have shut down. And the latest polling that we're seeing now from Quinnipiac is quite remarkable. The shift in sentiment among Americans over what is happening here in Israel has been pronounced over the last month. The university out with these numbers showing the number of voters in America sympathizing more with Palestinians increased by double digits compared to a survey last month, from 13% to 24%, the shift largely driven by respondents under 35 years old. And that's where we start our conversation today with Hadar Suskin, the president and CEO for the group Americans for Peace Now, is with us. Hadar, I appreciate your time and welcome to Bloomberg. We can have a debate here about Israel's motivations and the justification it has to wage a war with Hamas. But I'd like to talk to you about the effort here to save civilian lives. And I wonder what you see as the most important thing that happens now. We've got pauses in place. What is next?
Hi, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here with you today. I think there are, unfortunately, no easy answers in this conversation. There are a lot of bad options and a lot of difficult choices. And the need to protect civilian lives, Israeli and Palestinian civilian lives, should be paramount for everyone, for Israelis, for Hamas, and for the American government. Unfortunately, that's not what we've seen much of on the ground, and those losses have been massive and tragic on both sides. And I think, again, as you said, without getting into the justification for the war, which I'm happy to talk about it if you want to, there's no doubt that greater precautions and greater care need to be taken to protect civilian lives. I'm glad to see that fuel allowed into Gaza. It will help. It will help with desalination plants so there are clean water, with electricity. But it represents approximately 6 or 7% of the daily amount of fuel that was going in prior to the war. And it's clearly insufficient for the needs of the population there.
Fuel also means the bakeries can start functioning again so people can get bread. Israel says, Hadar, it wants to evacuate the Al-Shifa hospital. I just ran through some numbers. It's larger than some small towns, the number of people who are housed there right now. What is the right path for Israel when it comes to neutralizing the threat below the hospital and protecting the people who are in it?
It's difficult. And again, there's no easy options here. We have two truths. One is that Hamas embeds itself in civilian populations. Hamas does things like set up headquarters in hospitals and schools and other such places. That's an unequivocal truth. It's also true that even if they do that, even if they commit that act, which is a war crime, it doesn't justify the killing of civilians, even if that is unintentional. Intention has no part in this. So Israel is in a very difficult situation. It needs to defend itself, and it needs to respond to the really horrific attacks that took place on October 7th and make sure that Hamas is not able to do something like that again. But it also has a moral and legal responsibility, as well as a political one, to do so in a way that minimizes the loss of innocent civilian lives and that really honors the sanctity of all life.
And I know you're referring to both sides in this. You wrote an op-ed in The Hill, the headline, "In Israel and Gaza, I choose the side of humanity, realizing that Hamas chooses the other." Is that fair?
Well, again, the end of that was not in the headline. But yes, look, Hamas has made it clear.
No, I added that. I'm asking you that question based on your headline.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas has made it clear long before October 7th, but certainly with its horrific attack, which is a massacre of civilians, right? A massacre of innocent people, women, children, infants, that they don't respect human life. And frankly, the fact that they embed themselves among the civilian population in Gaza, the fact that they have food and fuel and other materials that they don't give to the civilian population of Gaza makes it clear that they don't have that respect for the sanctity of human life. The question that Israel faces, and the question that we as leaders in the United States face, is simply whether we're going to take the same position as Hamas or not. And for me, part of that point of choosing the side of humanity is moving away from what we've seen so much of on the, quote, pro-Israel side and pro-Palestinian side of people just trying to score points for their team, people trying to prove that Israelis are all right and justice and righteous and just, or Palestinians are all righteous and just. This is not that simple, and it's not a sporting event where you cheer for your team. These are the real lives of real people and incredibly difficult questions that don't have easy answers but need to be addressed.
Does Benjamin Netanyahu respect the lives of Palestinian civilians?
Look, I think it is unbelievably evident that Benjamin Netanyahu and his entire government have failed. That, frankly, was clear in many ways before October 7th, but on October 7th, it became clear that they failed at what is the fundamental function of government, which is protecting the lives of its civilians. And his response, what we've seen taking place in Gaza since then, as well as what we've seen in the West Bank, and frankly, what we saw before October 7th, is that Benjamin Netanyahu values his own political future. And that is his priority. He puts that ahead of, frankly, the good of the Israeli people and certainly the good of the Palestinian people.
What do you make of the Quinnipiac University poll that came out yesterday? I mentioned at the top of the hour here, we are seeing a shift. The number of voters in America sympathizing more with Palestinians increasing by double digits from the same survey last month. And it's not a surprise to see that driven by people under 35. Those who are older, and particularly those over 65, are far more likely to hold the opposite positions. And that probably represents lawmakers here in Washington and the active voting public a lot more. But was this a surprise to you or something that you expect to see continue?
Yeah, it's certainly not a surprise. I think given what we are seeing, the images that are coming out of Gaza, the stories and the reports that we're hearing, I'm not surprised at this at all. I agree with what you said, that doesn't reflect, certainly not Congress, and frankly, probably not the majority of voting Americans. You know, these polls I often honestly find very problematic and not very helpful beyond a broad talking point. Because if you ask me, am I pro-Israel? I would say yes. I'm an Israeli citizen. I am an IDF veteran. If you ask me, am I pro-Palestinian? I would also say yes. I don't think those things can be mutually exclusive. Not only that they shouldn't be, but they can't be. And I say that because, you know, this war is going to come to an end. It's not as soon as I would like it to, and I don't know when, but it will end. And when it does, there will still be Israelis there. And when it does, there will still be Palestinians there. And those Israelis and those Palestinians have to find a better way to live and work together going to the future. There's literally simply no option. So somebody who tells me that they are pro-Israel but anti-Palestinian is not pro-Israel, and the same the other way around.
We're spending some time talking with Hadar Susskind, the president and CEO of the group Americans for Peace Now, and a very important piece of information as a former member of the IDF, as you just told us. What do you think your former brothers in arms are going through here, being asked to carry out incredibly dangerous operations in Gaza?
Brothers and sisters, first of all, I will say. Israel certainly is one among the leaders in having integrated, in terms of gender, its armed forces, including its combat forces. Look, again, I think that the attacks of the 7th required a military response. No country would or should allow an attack like that on its citizens, a massacre of somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 people, 240 or so people taken hostage. So a military response, sadly, was necessary. But that's not a blank check, and that doesn't mean any military response is okay. The responsibility for that and for what the actions are and what the decisions are, of course, rests with the political leadership, not the day-to-day soldiers. But I'll tell you, along with many friends and many colleagues and acquaintances, I have a nephew who is a combat soldier in the IDF right now, and they are going through terrible, terrible things. And again, there's no one side to this. Obviously, the people of Gaza are suffering unimaginable horrors, but so too have the people of Israel, and so too have the soldiers of the IDF, many of whom have lost their lives in this recent bout of the conflict and been injured, and again, like everyone involved, been traumatized.
I'm really glad you could make some time for us, Hadar. Thank you for being with us. He runs the group Americans for Peace Now. Hadar Susskind, we thank you for joining today on Bloomberg. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, deeply curious what our panel thinks of this. Our signature panel, of course, with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Rick, there is a lot of nuance here, and when you talk to someone like Hadar, you realize there are so many people like him who have interests on both sides of the border, if you will, have family members who are impacted by both sides. He's got family members still fighting in the IDF even as he's calling for restraint and the protection of Palestinian civilians. This is an incredibly complex matter that's not always captured by the headlines, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the problem with any kind of war, is that you put civilians in harm's way just by nature of proximity to the people you're actually going after. I have no doubt that the Israeli government and the Israeli IDF have a objective to minimize civilian casualties as best they can. And I suspect, based on what I've been reading, from Prime Minister Netanyahu's own comments, that they feel they have failed to some degree in being able to protect civilians the way they wanted to. And of course, this is what President Biden and everyone has been suggesting they do better at. But at the end of the day, the people who put these civilians at risk were the Hamas attackers who planned and executed this heinous attack on Israel and brought that into the situation that now exists across the border. So again, you're right. I mean, it's very nuanced into, sort of why there are so many shortages today and how you can actually make sure that people get food and water while this operation goes on and not allow the Hamas operatives to use it as a weapon against the Israelis. So it's a very difficult situation, and one you just hope can stabilize sooner than later.
Jeannie, I'm looking forward to digging into this poll in a moment with you and getting your take on this. We only have 30 seconds. Are you hearing this before we do that about this from your students every day?
Yeah, we do. And of course, it's young people who are driving much of this discussion, as reflected in the Quinnipiac poll. It also reflected in Gallup and some of the other polling we have seen. They are not alone, but they are driving the conversation, to your point.
Reminding everyone, Jeannie's an educator, and I'll be curious to hear the view from what's happening at Iona University, of course, with Rick as well. It's all ahead. This is Bloomberg.
Profits. Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P 500 barely budging today, does remain above the 4,500 mark. Volume about 12% below its 30-day average this time of day. Amazon among the leaders in terms of index points right now, that is up 1.4%. Ross Stores, that's the best performing stock in the index. It's up 9% after results from the discount retailer. And among the most actively traded right now, ChargePoint shares, that is quite a plunge there. That is down 35% after their results. They missed estimates on sales. The CEO of the company also being replaced along with the CFO. And after the close of regular trading yesterday, we had shares of the Gap up. Right now, they're up 30% after they posted better than expected results. Now, the earnings scorecard of the 471 companies that have reported earnings so far this quarter, 82% have delivered positive earnings surprises. S&P 500, 6 points higher. That's up about 0.1%. 45.14 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is 15 points lower. The NASDAQ 100 right now up 16. Most of the action taking place with the small caps. The Russell 2000 Index right now up 23 points. That is a pop of 1.3%. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash, Joe.
This is Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
Whether you support Israel's military operation in Gaza or not, it's hard to deny that Benjamin Netanyahu may be developing a PR problem, and these numbers from Quinnipiac certainly pull us in that direction. As I mentioned, a real shift over the last month, particularly among young people. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Let's reassemble the panel with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors on a Friday here, trying to figure out the path forward as lawmakers leave town with a stopgap funding measure in place. In fact, Joe Biden signed it at 1:30 in the morning, apparently. At least that's when the White House announcement went out. We're not shutting down tonight. But the matter of Israel funding was not handled, never mind Ukraine. Jeannie, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about your thoughts on this poll here. I don't want to obsess over this, but it's the one sort of metric that we have here month to month, asking this question about voters sympathizing more with Palestinians or Israelis, in support for Palestinians increased by double digits over the last survey that was taken last month. Every time you look at a video, a newspaper, see a newscast, you're seeing horrifying images from inside Gaza. And it's not just Palestinian civilians. We're seeing Israeli troops being put into harm's way and being asked to conduct extremely difficult operations. When you see a poll with a trajectory like this, what's your reaction, and what does it mean about next month?
Well, you know, I think it's important to say this poll did show 7 out of 10 Americans hold Hamas responsible for what is going on now. So that is an important number to keep in mind. But to your point, amongst young people, empathy or sympathy for Hamas has increased. There has been a noticeable shift since October 7th, despite the overwhelming feeling amongst Americans that Hamas is responsible. And I think part of that is hidden in that poll when they ask young people, you know, is the U.S. too supportive of Israel? Is this in the United States' interest? And I think that's where we are seeing some drop off with young people. And I think it's incumbent on the administration and President Biden to make that case to young people. And it is important for them to underscore, yes, we are fully supportive of Israel. Yes, we fully support their efforts to destroy Hamas, given what happened. But if we are going to give taxpayer money and support this cause, we have a right to have assurance from the Israeli government that they will pursue a two-state solution. And of course, that they will not build one more brick of a settlement that is illegal on the West Bank. And that is where you look, Bibi Netanyahu on American television last night asked if he would support a two-state solution, said no. And this is where they are losing support amongst Americans and amongst young people. So I think that's where the administration has some work to do, and they're trying to do it. And I give Biden a lot of credit on that, but they have to do more work in that area, because we have a right with all this support to have an expectation that the money will go in the direction that we want it. It should be, not be that these billions of dollars are going over unfettered and being used for a whole host of things that the United States does not support.
Would love your thoughts on this. Rick, a lot of people, in fact, clearly most Americans, 7 out of 10, support the mission here. There are concerns about the strategy. Does this type of sentiment rub off on the Biden administration to the extent that it's supporting Israel?
I think there's a big question there, because when you look under the numbers and you look at this by party ID, Republicans overwhelmingly support what's happening here. I don't think anybody would jump to the conclusion that that means they're going to support, Joe Biden for his reelection to president. Independents split almost right down the middle on whether they sympathize with the Palestinians or the Israelis. And Democrats are the big mover here. It's not just young people, it's young Democrats. And young Democrats have been a blessing and a curse for the Democratic Party for a long time. They are a blessing in that they have marched to the abortion call post-Roe and have fueled Democrat pickups in a lot of areas around the country. And in this case, you really have to scratch your head and wonder whether or not, they sit at home if they don't feel like this administration holds their values when it comes to things like the cause for Palestinians. So it's going to be a tough plight for Democrats who are depending upon this voter group to potentially be the difference in this election.
Well, it certainly reminds us how sensitive this situation is and how important it will be at the hospital for Israel to do this right. Rick, do you agree that that hospital should be evacuated so the IDF can do its job underground?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually wondering why the hospital wasn't evacuated long before this, right? There have been a call for evacuations, in northern Gaza for the first day of the assault by Israeli troops into Gaza, and it just seems prudent that they would have already have evacuated most of the critical care patients, including those preemies that have been without their incubators for weeks now. So yeah, I think obviously I think it makes immense sense to take these people out of harm's way. They are in a war zone. And so, sure, yeah. I mean, I think that the more people we can get out of that area, the better. And I do, at least give some credence to the Israelis who have been going out of their way to drop leaflets and to advise people to get out of some of these areas. I know that it's got to be wrenching to be a Palestinian family with no extra grind on this, to be kicked out of their family homes only to probably see it destroyed in the aftermath of firefights between Hamas and Israel. So it's a horrible situation, but one in which I know that everyone hopes for the safety of any civilians not involved in the conflict.
The Israeli military, Jeannie, has posted photos of weapons that it says were located in a different hospital, the Al-Quds hospital, which was evacuated days ago. I think part of the problem is not only the sensitive nature, the complex nature of moving people who are in critical condition. There's nowhere really for them to go. The whole conversation about refugees, for instance, really has not progressed in the last couple of weeks while this operation has continued, has it?
It has not. And that is, again, a source of real concern. And when you hear Bibi Netanyahu on the Sunday shows last weekend, and he's saying, we have warned people that they must leave, the question comes back, where are they going to go? There's no simple answer to that. He's absolutely right about that. But that is not an answer to tell people, particularly people hospitalized, that they are supposed to go, but anybody there, because there is nowhere to go. And one other thing we should keep in mind, Representative Gallagher not long ago published a piece about the amount of pro-Hamas rhetoric going out on TikTok. And while we don't, at least I have not seen data to support this point, it is something really worth considering as it pertains to the movement of young people in such a quick period of time in this direction. And again, I haven't seen data to support this point. I understand TikTok is pushing against it. But as Joe Biden is meeting with Xi this week in San Francisco, and Congress continues to consider what to do about TikTok, this is really, really worth underscoring. Anybody who spends even a modicum of time on TikTok can see there is a lot of rhetoric there. Again, we need data to support whether it is much more pro-Hamas than Israel. But that is something the United States government has to consider if we see very, very quick and sharp movements in opinion, and particularly on a venue that is attractive and used by young people in this country and run by the Chinese government, or at least housed in China, where they have an enormous sway over what comes out on that venue. It is definitely worth considering, and I recommend Gallagher's piece to everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. In our remaining 30 seconds before some news here, Rick, to see Osama bin Laden's letter to America go viral on TikTok, is that enough reason to have it banned on its own?
Ban the talk. I've been at it for years now. It's the one thing that I probably agree with most about Donald Trump's administration. They weren't able to get it done. I think Joe Biden would do everybody in our country a favor by following up on that policy. Get rid of the talk.
Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, a great talk. We're glad it's Friday. We've got more to talk about. We haven't touched George Santos because he could be packing up his office, it looks like, as soon as next week, with this resolution now moving to bring about another vote on his expulsion following the Ethics Committee investigation. We are living in wild times. Let's bring you up to date on world and national news now. Leslie Lotto has that for us from the newsroom in New York. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, Joe. Israel says it will allow 2 diesel tankers a day into Gaza to support the water and sewage system and prevent the outbreak of disease. The president has signed a stopgap to keep the government open into early next year, and it puts off fights over aid to Israel and Ukraine for now. Brown University political scientist Wendy Schiller says Republicans and Democrats alike have good reason to give this debate more time.
These conflicts are long, at least Ukraine and Russia, and we don't know how long the Israeli-Palestine conflict will last, and we don't know who else will jump in to that Middle East conflict. So to send more aid to Israel, Democrats seem to be very supportive of that. Some Republicans are also very supportive of that. And not couple it with Ukraine puts us in an even more intense position in that conflict. If you have at least a combo bill, you can say the United States is exercising its sort of global might, but separating them, I think, becomes more problematic for the United States in general. And it doesn't seem to me that Biden is all that anxious for it.
Brown's Wendy Schiller says president's under pressure from progressives over support for Israel's war in Gaza. New U.S. home construction unexpectedly spikes up. Residential starts were up nearly 2% in October, the highest in 3 months. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Leslie Lotto, and this is Bloomberg.
Profits. Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg News with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P 500 remaining above 4,500, heading toward its longest streak of weekly gains since July. And then you have 10-year U.S. yields hovering around 4.4%. Oil is climbing after sinking into a bear market. Applied Materials, the worst performing stock right now in the S&P 500. That's down about 5% after a report that it faces a criminal investigation for allegedly violating export restrictions to China. The stock rally so far, by the way, has added $2.7 trillion in market value this month. Jay Pulaski at TPW Investment does see a sustained rally for stocks continuing.
I think we're in the early stages of a classic year-end rally, and when you think about it, all the factors are lining up. You have seasonality, so November, December, the best 2 months of the year. You have sentiment up until the past week has been very, very bearish. You have positioning.
And right now, the S&P 500, 8 points higher. That's up 0.2%. We're at 45.16. The Dow Jones Industrial averaged 24 points higher right now, 34,971. The NASDAQ 100 is up 22 points. That's a rise of 0.1%. A lot of the action taking place with the smaller cap stocks. The Russell 2000 index is up 1.4%. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
George Santos, the congressman from New York, is going to hold a news conference. He's scheduled a news conference for the Thursday after Thanksgiving, November 30. Will he resign? I can only imagine after the news yesterday. The Ethics Committee in the House out with its report on Santos. Scathing is the word the news organizations are going with. And my goodness, Santos improperly diverting thousands of dollars, as we read, from his campaign for personal use. Everything from Botox to luxury items. And they're actually going through with this. The chair of the Ethics Committee, Michael Guest, this is a Republican, by the way, it's Republican-led House, has done the deed. He filed a privileged resolution to expel Santos during today's pro forma session. It's the one piece of business that matters today in Washington, and that starts the clock ticking, gives you 2 legislative days to deal with this. So next week could be something here, although, well, they've headed home for Thanksgiving, so we might have to wait a minute. When he comes back into town here, the news conference is going to be well attended, I think. We'll reassemble our panel for their take on things. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors. It does look like the writing is on the wall here, Jeannie. Is this the end of George Santos's political career?
It is one way or the other. You know, at least this pushed him to announce that he is not going to seek re-election. But right. I do think if they go for a vote, he will be expelled at this point. But boy, what a horrific, ugly, dirty ending to, I think maybe, and I wouldn't say this lightly, one of the ugliest years in the modern history of Congress. So it is quite a way to end the year. And, you know, you think about it, not just Botox, but what he was spending his campaign funds on. At least on Thursday when he holds the press conference, we know he'll be well-dressed and he'll look good, Joe, because he's been spending an awful lot to shore himself up for that.
He's got a lot of sweaters, that's for sure. Rick, will he resign before his colleagues have a chance to vote him out?
If he's smart, he will. You know, that would certainly create a little different environment when they get back on the 28th of November. As you mentioned, it's not often that you get this kind of a resolution by the chairman of the Ethics Committee. He's already been tested twice on getting votes for his expulsion, maybe third time's the charm. And I think this whole idea of a press conference on the 30th, I mean, he may not be a member by the 30th. of November. So, you know, I don't know why anybody would show up to hear him talk about why he was expelled from Congress. But the bottom line is, I actually see it as a positive. It shows you that the ethics committee is working, that it's been bipartisan, that it's actually doing its job, and that maybe together Republicans and Democrats can celebrate the fact that they can police their own ranks for a change. All we've talked about since Santos was elected is what a blight he is on the Republican Party, and how he makes kind of a joke of the institution. And maybe it got to the point where members are going to start thinking about their own image of the institution, what's good for it, for a change. And certainly, as Jeannie said, been a rough year in that regard, but maybe we're entering the end of this year in a different tone.
He'd be the first member expelled since James Traficant, which, God, that was back in 2002. It's been a long time since this has happened, Jeannie. So beam me up. What do you think? Does he resign before he gets thrown out?
To Rick's point, if he has any sense, and gosh, I'm not sure he does, but if he has any sense, he will resign. You know, the reality is that the committee, and again, bipartisan and unanimous with this scathing report, they didn't even vote or go forward with a formal expulsion recommendation because it would have extended this ugly chaos into next year. So in the interest of getting this over quickly, pulling the Band-Aid quickly, they decided not to go in that direction. And so it really is something. I mean, Ken Buck, the congressman from Colorado, said, George, now is the time to resign. Then you have some quiet days over the Thanksgiving holidays to clean out your office. And gosh, I wish he and hope he is listening to that. But again, there's no telling what he is thinking and what he's doing. But, you know, I think Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York's got to get her pen ready. If he does resign, she's got 2 days to call for a special election. And that is going to be a big deal. A lot of candidates in the offing on both sides to try to contest for that seat that Biden won by 8 points, that district.
Yeah, that'll be a riot. No one would be surprised if it turned Democratic in a state that has been pretty kind to Republicans lately. Rick, if this actually happens, does it start a conversation about a double standard in the Republican Party when it comes to Donald Trump?
You know, it could. There's a lot of sensitivity on both sides of the aisle about not jumping ahead of the process. And so, you know, the fact that the ethics committee kind of plowed the field for the idea of going forward with this, even though no one has actually convicted Santos of wrongdoing, the overwhelming weight of the evidence, and the expansive report. I mean, typically the ethics committee only releases like a half a pager on their investigations. 50 pages of indictment against Representative Santos was presented, and it just overwhelmingly indicts him on his behavior. So, yeah, I think that there will be some thought about around the vote, especially, are we creating a moral equivalency here about Donald Trump? But my guess is people are just going to want to put the blinders on and say, like, this is about George Santos, and we got to get him out of our institution.
Do you each have thoughts on what he does here, other than potentially go to jail, if that's where this is going? With his criminal case, Jeannie, does he go to reality TV? This country loves a rehabilitation story, right? Is he going to be on the talk show circuit? What happens?
Yeah, I can only imagine. Maybe he'll start a podcast, you know, maybe he will go into fashion. I can't even guess what he will do next, but gosh, it would be great to get him out of politics and out of the U.S. House. And nobody wants that more than his constituents in that Long Island district. The Republicans are pulling their hair out that he has been sitting there wasting their votes for 2 years now, not even on a committee.
Right. We've only got 30 seconds again, Rick. Could he get a lot of money for a book? Is that actually what comes next?
I think a TV show would be better. I mean, it'd be part comedy and part drama.
And fashion, apparently. Rick Davis, Jeannie Shanzano have some final thoughts with us straight ahead. This is really happening. George Santos, read about it. We've got a great story on the terminal and at Bloomberg.com. If you want to understand the charges and what was inside that ethics report, it's a reader. I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
And from Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm John Tucker. Alexa, find me a job. Amazon cutting hundreds of employees in the division responsible for the voice-activated assistant Alexa, according to a memo that was sent to employees today. Dan Roush, an Amazon vice president who leads teams working on Alexa and the company's Fire TV streaming franchise, said the company is shifting some of their efforts to better align with their business priorities, including focusing on building capabilities powered by generative AI. That criminal ransomware gang behind the recent attack on Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, they have claimed responsibility for 2 more attacks on U.S. financial firms. The Lockbit gang adding the Chicago Trading Company and Alphadyne Asset Management this week to a list of victims on its dark web page. The gang has given them deadlines to make unspecified payments, and they're also threatening to publish stolen data online if their demands are not met. Several Tesla shareholders rebuking CEO Elon Musk for endorsing anti-Semitic views on his social media platform X, with some saying he should be suspended. Investors may not go as far as to say they'll reduce their Tesla holdings, but several say they were pretty much taken aback after Musk agreed with a post that said Jewish people hold a dialectical hatred of white people. And those are just some of the company stories that we are following for you this hour. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
We're live from Washington on this Friday. Thanks for being with us on the fastest show in politics, keeping you up to date, of course, always. Leslie Lotto joins now with world and national news from the newsroom in New York. Hi, Leslie.
Thank you, Joe. Hello. After reports of the growing possibility of widespread starvation in Gaza, the UN was forced to stop deliveries of food and other necessities after internet and phone service went down due to a lack of fuel. Israel announced it's allowing a, quote, very minimal amount of fuel into the area daily, but the shipments appear to be far less than what the UN says is needed. The communications blackout is in day 2. At the same time, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told CBS News last night that there could be a deal soon to release some of the more than 200 hostages.
We're closer than we were before we began the ground action, because the ground action has put pressure on Hamas to achieve a ceasefire. We'll have a temporary ceasefire if we can get our hostages back.
President Biden has ended the immediate threat of a government shutdown, signing a temporary spending bill extending government funding into early next year, as we hear from Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
President Biden signed the legislation yesterday while in California for a summit of APEC leaders. The bill maintains existing funding levels and pushes a fight over the federal budget into the new year, when House Republicans say they will push for stiff spending cuts. It splits the deadlines for passing full-year appropriations bills into 2 days, January 19th for some federal agencies, February 2nd for others. This short-term package allows lawmakers to regroup over the Thanksgiving holiday while talks continue on spending and policy agreements. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And a welcome break at the pump for holiday travel. A consumer price analysis by Alliant Credit Union shows turkey prices are the lowest they've been since 2021, and gas prices are also going down. Don't do the happy dance quite yet, though, Joe, as the cost savings might be offset by rising costs for other items like baked goods, booze, and canned veggies. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Leslie Lotto, and this is Bloomberg. Back to you, Joe.
Hi, Leslie. I do appreciate it. As we remember the idea, the concept of a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. Remember this? Last time SpaceX tried to put the big one up there, and you might have been hearing about this, they're going to try it again this weekend. Starship and Super Heavy, it didn't go that well. A rapid, unscheduled disassembly, of course, means it blew up. I don't know how they come up with this stuff, but we're going to try again tomorrow. The window opens at 7 a.m. at SpaceX's Starbase launch site in Texas. That's 7 a.m. local time, and they have till 7:20 to make this thing work. This is a big deal, or at least it will be when it works. Starship and Super Heavy is supposed to bring us back to the moon. This mission, not so much, as it aims to reach near orbital speeds, but will put us a lot closer to unlocking the full potential of this thing. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano joined because we like to geek out on space sometimes. Rick, this thing is larger than a Saturn V, the rocket that brought Neil Armstrong to the moon. You going to be watching tomorrow?
Absolutely. These are the greatest things to watch. The Super Heavy melted the launch pad on its first go-round when it exploded on launch after launch. And,
yes.
And this one's been delayed by a day. So we're looking forward to it tomorrow.
How about it, Jeannie? Rapid, unscheduled disassembly is sort of like a conscious decoupling, right?
Thinking of Gwyneth Paltrow. Thank you, Joe Matthew. That was exactly on my mind. So I appreciate it. And I, too, will be up early to watch. And hopefully it's not a rapid uncoupling or whatever you said about this time around. And get up there.
Absolutely. Rapid, unscheduled disassembly. I still say that would be a great band name. How has that not happened yet? We're going on tour this summer, but we have to make this work tomorrow, and by God, we can do it. We geek out on space here on Bloomberg like no one, and we'll be watching tomorrow to see Starship and Super Heavy do its thing. Step back, Hal. You got nothing. Thanks to Rick and Jeannie. Have a great weekend, guys. Our signature panel singing us into the weekend. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington as we hope for the best. Hour 2 of Sound On starts right now.
our nation's capital. This is Bloomberg Sound On.
Two major stories that we're following here developing before our eyes.
What does it say about Trump's influence on the Republican Party?
What can the Biden administration do on its own to support Israel?
Bloomberg Sound On. Politics, policy, and perspective from D.C.'s top names.
The Republican caucus is at war with itself. Members of Congress would have a press conference every day if somebody would cover that.
There is bipartisan support for Israel.
This is one of the big ones we only see once every decade or 2 decades in the Middle East.
Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
The government will not shut down tonight. That's about all I can promise. Welcome to Hour 2 of Sound On as we head for the holiday here with a long to-do list in Washington and no clear path to get anything done. We're going to talk about the future of the Republican-led House with a true Washington insider. Mark Short is with us, former Chief of Staff to the House Republican Conference, former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence with us here at the table. We'll also share his views on the shifting campaign landscape from Iowa to New Hampshire. We've got plenty to talk about today. It's almost time to head to Grandma's house, of course. Leslie Lotto was talking earlier about the trajectory for gas prices, and we've got an eye on it with Patrick DeHaan from Gas Buddy coming up, and later we'll spend some time with our friend David Weston, the host of Bloomberg Wall Street Week, who spoke earlier with former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. So let's get to it, starting as always with an update on the markets. We go to Wall Street with John Tucker. Hey, John.
Hey, guys. Major indexes headed for a third straight week in the green, spurred by hopes for maybe a soft landing for the economy. Also, the prospect of interest rate cuts arriving during the first half of next year. There should also be some degree of volatility in today's market as we see $2.4 trillion in options. They are set to expire today. David Lefkowitz at UBS advising clients, you know what, stick with quality names.
We have a low unemployment rate, we have an inverted yield curve, and inflation is coming down, but it's still higher than the Fed's target. That's a late cycle environment. For stocks, in our work, that suggests you want to own quality companies. These are companies that have high returns on capital, they have strong balance sheets, they generate consistent and generally less volatile earnings growth.
We had some economic data released today, showed construction of new homes rising 1.9% in October, so that's helping the home builder stocks today. S&P 500, 9 points higher, 0.2% higher, 45.17. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 34. The NASDAQ 100 is up 27 points, a rise of 0.2%. So the rally continues. Some of the real action taking place with the small caps, the Russell 2000, that is up 1.4%. And Joe and Kaylee, we're seeing more fallout from Elon Musk's Twitter post. It was X post. Lionsgate Entertainment suspending all advertising on X effective immediately. Check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. Joe and Kaylee.
Thanks for the update there, John. I'm glad to say Kaylee's on her way to Grandma's house already, but you're stuck with me here in Washington, and I'm glad you're with us. Welcome to the Friday edition, Hour 2 of Sound On. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Find us on YouTube now. Search Bloomberg Global News. Of course, you already know about the radio, the satellite, the podcast. As we consider our station in life here going into the Thanksgiving break and what was done this week, what was actually accomplished, and what has yet to be done, it's a much longer list on the other side here, and that's where we're going to begin our conversation with Mark Short. I just rattled through his business card. It's a long one as he straddles both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. This is the insider conversation that I was promising. Former head of the Republican conference in the House, former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Great to see you, sir.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we avoided a shutdown. We could take a minute to celebrate that, right? We're not shutting down this week. Everybody would have been freaking out right now and planning to work over the weekend in any other world.
That's right. And I think we'll probably avoid another one come January and February. But it does at least extend it for a couple months as opposed to all the way through the next fiscal year. But I think that House Republicans seem to be coming to acceptance that they don't control the Senate or the White House. And so their negotiating leverage here isn't quite the same. It is, I think, somewhat ironic, Joe, that the deal that Kevin McCarthy negotiated just a few weeks back, that he ended up getting removed from his speakership for, actually had $60 billion less in spending than this CR does.
How about that?
So, for all those members who were claiming that they were fighting for principle on fiscal sanity. I think it's been clearly exposed earlier as more of a personal problem with Kevin for them than it was really ever policy.
Well, I know some members are getting a little annoyed already. We're hearing Chip Royce, he's got 2 strikes against him already. Should they have fixed that motion to vacate before? You already answered my next question, is you don't think we're going to shut down in January. That probably means, though, he's got to work with Democrats again. So is he going to run into the same trouble as his predecessor?
I think the reality is that Republicans are going to have to work with Democrats because they control the Senate and they control the White House. And so whether it's inside the House conference, I think the old position always was the stronger bill you can get out of the House, the more negotiating leverage you have. But I think there's some conservatives, I think, who on principle take a position that they will never vote for CR and that Congress should do its job and pass appropriations bills. The margin is so narrow that means that you're never going to do anything but a CR right now because you're going to have to work with the Democrats to get one passed out of the House.
So the idea of regular order by whatever it is, February 2nd, that's not what we're talking about here. You think there might be another stopgap? It wouldn't be a year long, right? That would be the end of the speaker, I'm assuming.
Well, I do think you'll get a CR that'll finish through the rest of the fiscal year. I'm not sure that the Republicans are in a position right now, having gone through the exercise with Kevin, that they want to remove another speaker. So I do think that that's where we'll end up. I think at the same time, there'll be appropriations bills put forward in the House that try to pass. I'm skeptical that they'll actually get all 12 done. So I think you're going to end up with another CR, yes.
I want to ask you, of course, about the rest of the job here. It's not just funding the government, but the supplemental budget request. Israel, Ukraine, we talk about it every day, and there's no real path here, though we've had members of the Senate tell us they think they might actually be able to get this over the finish line in December and not prolong a wait into next year. Are they speaking a different language still than the House on this?
I think that I'm probably optimistic as well that inevitably there'll be funding for Ukraine and Israel. But I'm probably thinking that won't be a standalone bill. I think that's probably something that comes forward combined with the CR in January or February, because at that point, if you're accepting the conversation you and I are already having, that inevitably you're going to need a bipartisan CR bill, then I think the Senate will have more leverage at that point to go ahead and attach the additional supplemental funding. Because Johnson's not going to be able to get a Republican-only bill out of the House. So you're going to have to do something bipartisan anyhow. So at that point, it makes more sense to attach that funding.
Hinging on an agreement, some breakthrough that we've waited decades for on border security. Is that fair?
I'm probably less optimistic on the border security funding. I think that a lot of Republicans are anxious to see that. But I think, as Ron DeSantis said from the debate stage a few weeks back, the reality is what the Biden administration is proposing in border security funding is really just more funding to facilitate more asylum processing and to actually allow more refugees into the United States. And I don't think that's really what Republicans are looking for. They want bricks and mortar. They want a wall. They want to change the asylum law, right? So I'm probably less optimistic on the border security piece of it.
Boy, I have to ask you about this. We're just talking about George Santos. It's an interesting scenario here because of an election in Utah. It might actually be a wash if George Santos is expelled. The Republican majority remains the same. I don't know if that matters to you. Do you think he resigns before he's expelled? Do you think the votes are there to expel?
Well, first, I don't think it's a wash because I think the Utah seat is pretty much guaranteed to be a Republican seat. So the reality is we're going to pick up that seat regardless. And I think that you're going to be down one more member when either he's expelled or he does resign. I don't pretend to know what's in his head as to what he's going to do. I think he's going to do whatever gets him the most press attention.
So call a news conference for November 3rd.
I could see him coming back and having a press conference, and but ultimately pulling out right before the vote if he feels like he's going to lose the vote.
So he's probably taking a temperature and seeing where
I think he is probably
comes together over Thanksgiving. Does the conference want him out?
I think the conference, well, I think they're competing interests. I think for a lot of members, they probably do want him out, but at the same time,
they want to lose a seat.
We've talked about how narrow the majority is. It's not like they can really afford additional seats. And I think you're seeing more and more announcements of retirements, and some of those people may not wait till next November. So that majority could even get even smaller, which is why I think a lot of Republicans would probably want to say, like, can we just see, he's announced he's not going to run again, let's get to next November. But I don't think that that's going to last. I think he'll probably be pushed out sooner.
Boy, what a story. And we won't be able to say the latest since James Traficant anymore if this actually happens. Spending time with Mark Short, I have to ask you about the campaign trail. The former vice president is no longer running. And we're seeing a surge here, it seems, for Nikki Haley's campaign. Are those associated somehow?
I'm not so convinced they are, and I'm actually. I think there's been a surge in the press coverage and a surge in donor support for Nikki Haley, which is not inconsequential, Joe. Those are very important things that you need. But at the same time, you've seen actually former President Trump's numbers go up into the 60s.
Yeah, how about that?
And so even though there's maybe a small boost for Nikki or a small boost for DeSantis or even Chris Christie in New Hampshire, the reality is that Donald Trump is leading the field by 40 to 50 points.
Well, we've got a Monmouth poll now. We had an Emerson poll the other day. You showed Nikki Haley vaulting into second place in New Hampshire, Ron DeSantis falling to 4. It does seem like there is a bit of a shift in the so-called race for second.
They're changing places in the race for second, but the delta between where that is and where Donald Trump is remains the same.
Massive, absolutely. Right. But it's also not lost on me that the only other voice on the debate stage with foreign policy experience has left. And that suddenly makes Nikki Haley unique in the field.
I think it does create a separation for her in the debate, which is important. I think anytime you're in a crowded field, you want to have something that segments the market and differentiates yourself. And I think that with everything going on in the Middle East right now, it does give her a much bigger platform to speak from at this moment.
This is not a race, though, different than other cycles, not a race for vice president. Right? Donald Trump doesn't want any of them, and it doesn't seem they want to be with him. Isn't that peculiar?
I think that people's ambitions are such that what they might proclaim during the campaign trail, that they may be more willing to serve in that role. And I think you may also see that former President Trump is more willing to extend that offer if he feels like it's advantageous to him. So I wouldn't rule any of them out yet to be a vice presidential pick.
Donald Trump, Nikki Haley. I mean, she worked for him. She brings the foreign policy experience and apparently a slightly different base of support. I suppose anything's possible, but there'll be a lot of tape to play back on.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend that she's running for that at this point. I think she is running for president. I do think that the president, former president, has pointed out many times how she made a pledge that she would never run against him, and yet she did. And so I don't want any way to predict that that's where we're going to end up.
Sure,
but I do think that people's ambitions are such that their stated principles can be somewhat more flexible.
Well, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about your former boss, and I'm sure that you still talk to Mike Pence. He had, support him or not, kind of a unique spot on that stage, and I wonder to what effect he might be able to help affect the outcome of this campaign, whether he's going to reserve that until later, or maybe this is just a completely different chapter. Does he go back into media? What do you see in the future for him?
I think he's going to have a lot of different opportunities, Joe. Right now, I don't think that he's in a hurry to endorse in this race. I think it needs to play out some. But I think he had the opportunity on the stage to talk about concerns he has about where our party is going and candidly where the conservative movement is going. In many cases, I think walking away from its time-honored principles of limited government in pursuit of a more populist appeal, in many ways walking away from our alliances and partnerships with democracies across the globe and wanting to retreat and be more of an appeasing isolationist approach. And so I think he was able to make those points. I think you're going to continue to hear him make those points in the future.
Is he glad he ran?
Oh, I think he felt like it was a blessing to get to spend so much time with voters in Iowa and New Hampshire. And I think he was grateful that he had a chance to make those points on the stage.
It's really something when you consider his career, particularly at the end of the Trump administration, his involvement in January 6th, and the voice that he had, which is why I'm curious to see what it might become, because I feel like he's probably not done here. But this is a pretty complex time. You're going to be on the campaign trail, I guess, and I know you watch this very closely. Is the media getting it right or wrong on Ron DeSantis? Because he's being labeled as the Jeb Bush of this campaign.
I think that they're actually getting it wrong at this point. I think there's no doubt that there was a lot of inflation from the media about DeSantis' candidacy before he ran.
Enormous expectations.
And so then, therefore, the narrative is one that compares him more to Jeb and sort of the notion of a collapse. But I think right now DeSantis is in second place in Iowa, which is the first caucus. And so I think that we have to wait to get through that Iowa perspective, and then we can reassess where DeSantis' campaign is. I think it's premature to write an obituary that suggests that he's following the same path as Jeb Bush.
Well, when you see, how Iowa can really be a game changer. It can shake things up, and then it can happen again in New Hampshire. frequently against the grain here. You remember Mike Huckabee winning, Rick Santorum. Is Iowa going to surprise us this time? What do you
I think there will be a surprise in Iowa, whether or not it's somebody wins or whether or not somebody simply comes in a much closer second place for Donald Trump. The expectation right now that I think the Trump campaign has pushed is one that he's going to run away with this. And so even if there's a candidate who finishes, let's say, within 10 points, I think for a lot of media, it's going to be, whoa, wait a second, maybe this is actually closer. And so I do think that the Trump campaign has built up exceedingly high expectations for how they would do in Iowa and New Hampshire. And I do think that Iowa relishes the chance to sort of change the narrative. Iowa voters take it very seriously. As you mentioned, Santorum and Huckabee, as well as Barack Obama.
That's right.
All of these candidates were polling really, in Obama's case, in the low double digits, but others high single digits
totally shook up
until
the
the fall. And so I think that people forget as well that in 2016, Donald Trump did not win Iowa.
Yeah, how about
people just assume that he did, but it actually was Ted Cruz who won the Iowa
waited a long time to find
caucus.
out.
And so yeah, I think there will be surprises in Iowa.
Well, so to that end, it was remarkable to watch the dominoes fall in the Democratic primary between Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina in 2020. Joe Biden, we were doing exit interviews with Joe Biden in Manchester, and all of a sudden, what the heck? Everybody dropped out within 3 hours or something. He goes flying into South Carolina, and he's anointed essentially the nominee. Are we going to see an attempt, maybe not a successful one, but an attempt to clear the field here and identify an alternative to Donald Trump? Coalesce around that person?
I think the market forces do that naturally. The reality is if you don't have the fundraising to continue on, it's hard to continue on. And I think we're already down to really 4 principal candidates, and you may be in a narrower field by the time you get to Iowa. So I don't know how much more there is, but Joe, I do think I probably have a less contemporary perspective on this. I think for a lot of the media, the notion is, hey, you just need to get down to one alternative to Trump.
Right.
And I think that what we've seen is that as candidates get out of the race, it almost builds more inevitability that Trump is going to be the nominee.
Wow.
As we just talked about, as candidates have gotten out, you've actually seen Trump's numbers get up above 60%. And as Ron DeSantis' numbers collapsed early in his campaign, it wasn't like that went to the rest of the field. That support went back to Donald Trump. And so I'm not buying this I think, conventional wisdom that says, hey, there needs to be one alternative to Trump. I think in actuality, as candidates fall out, it builds more inevitability that Trump will be the nominee.
Unreal. It's like the gravitational pull of the sun. Mark Short, great to see you. Happy
Jeff,
Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Always a pleasure to have
Appreciate
you at the table here. Republican strategist Mark